and I made the volume pretty low. Hello, folks. If you are joining us for the Met and Wikipedia Fashion Editing Meetup, you are in the right place. We were actually 15 minutes early, starting a little bit early just to make sure everyone is set. So you are in the right place. We will be starting in about 10 or 15 minutes at the bottom of the hour. My name is Andrew Lee, one of the Wikipedia editors and also the Wikimedia strategist with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We'll be doing a full intro to other folks later on the show, but you are in the right place. And we are using a system called StreamYard. So you might be watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, or even Twitter. And we encourage you to share this feed to other folks in your networks and hope that you'll see all kinds of neat things today as we try to improve Wikipedia and Wikimedia content with content from the Met and other resources that are out there. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can chat back to us and we can actually bring up your comments on screen to respond to them. If you're on Facebook, you can also do the same thing. If you are replying in the thread where you're seeing this video, we can see your name and your comment if you authenticate against the StreamYard system. So if you're on Facebook, you can go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and that will allow you to authenticate so that when we see your name on the screen, we can actually bring it up on screen, and someone has done that. So, for example, we can do that. So welcome, Edgar, and we can bring up comments on screen here. So we're really great to see so many people here. We are, seeing hundreds of folks now joining us in the video feed, which is great, from all over the world, Portugal and other locales. So we're really glad to see so many folks interested in this, our first virtual edit-a-thon for the Met and Wikipedia. We've run a number of in-person edit-a-thons in New York City, but this is our first virtual edit-a-thon, and we're so glad to see so many folks joining us for this. We have other folks from India. Great. Good to see that. Sylvia, we have Sylvia from Taiwan. We have Rosita from Italy. We even have some folks coming in from Twitter. So glad to see folks from Twitter. Someone saying howdy. I don't know if you're from the South or from Texas, but glad to see that as well. We have folks from Florida. Hi, Michelle from Florida. More folks from Portugal. We have a great Portuguese following here, and from Italy, Fatima and Maria. So great to see some folks. And we also have Xavier from Puerto Rico. Great. Sweden, Spain, Indonesia. My goodness. This is a lot more than what would show up in a physical edit-a-thon in New York City. So we're so glad to see so many folks here. Again, we are pre-show for the Met and Wikipedia Fashion Editing Meetup. Tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing folks from Germany, Mexico, Italy, Spain, Portugal. This is great. South Carolina. We are going to get started at the bottom of the hour, but maybe what we can do while we're pre-show is to make sure you know where to go. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, if you go to Wikipedia, and this is being coordinated on English Wikipedia, but is absolutely not restricted to English. If you are more comfortable in French, Portuguese, whatever your native tongue is, absolutely get involved in your native tongue. And if you go to that page on English Wikipedia, WP:/Met Fashion 2020, you can get to the coordination page for this edit-a-thon. So we're going to have Richard Nipel, who's the Wikimedian in residence with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, walk us through some of the basics to make sure you know how to have an account on Wikipedia and get ready to edit. We'll go over this as well once we get the edit-a-thon started, but Richard can step in and start to show us some of the stuff that you need to know to get your account registered and in our system. So Richard, are you there? Ready to take it away?
Glad to. Great. So welcome, everyone. Hi, Richard Nipel. I'm user Pharos on Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects. I would like to encourage people to start a Wikipedia account if you don't have one. So the easiest way to do that is to go to this URL, go to register.wikiseum.org, made just for this occasion, and you can register a Wikipedia account. We generally advise people, the most common practice is to pick something fun. Usually not your full name, but just something sort of fun and interesting, and you can register your account there. So Fashion Lover 572, whatever, something more specific and interesting than that. You will be logged on to our dashboard, which is where we will be able to see all of the contributions that people make today. So if you look at I'm sharing this page right now. We have 74 editors, 62 edits, 7 articles edited already. I mean, mostly by people who've just been doing it, on their own. You sort of people doing general Wikipedia edits. But we invite you to join and register your account and start creating your page. Once you create your Wikipedia account, you might want to start your own. Might start a page for yourself. So for example, here is I'll just share what my Wikipedia page looks like. Wikipedia user page. You sort of click on your name, and you can share it. And so it just says a little bit about me. It says, among other things, that I do some stuff with MoMA with Wikipedia, and it links to some items. So you might want to link, say that you link to some fashion items that you're interested in, or you might put some pictures of works in the Met that you like, particularly fashion works. So there's some different options you can do. Oh, it says among other things that I do some. Yeah, so glad to share for projects with the Met, and I don't know what we want to cover as we're still going in, but one thing that you can do is you can start looking at searching the Met for some nice images you might use today. So one thing that we have is sorry.
And Richard is looking at those things up. Just wanted to introduce some more folks coming from around the world. We have Finland. We've got Germany, Israel. So glad to see so many folks from around the world. Be sure to reshare this out to your networks, whether you're on Facebook, on YouTube, or Twitter. And let folks know we're going to be talking about fashion and the content in Wikipedia that coincides with the launch of the Met's exhibition. The first one it's launching since it's reopened during the era of COVID-19. So Richard, you want to tell us what you're showing us here?
Yeah, so I wanted to show off some of the images. So if you look at this is the Meetup page for today. So this is the Meetup page on English Wikipedia with some resources. So some artists that are in the current exhibition about time, some tasks that can be improved. For example, Stub's articles about fashion that are not very developed yet, some visual vocabularies. And one of the things that you can do is you can search images that the Met has uploaded to Wikimedia Commons. So for example, this is how you would click on that link there, and you type in something like gloves. You click search, and these are all images of gloves from different time periods, from different cultures that are available to use on Wikipedia articles. The Metropolitan Museum has donated about 300,000 or so images to the public domain that people can use for whatever purpose on Wikimedia Commons and elsewhere. So for example, if you want to look up tricorns, you can look up tricorns. And something you might want to do is, you could use these in articles. You can put one of these on your user page. And we want to help enrich the history of fashion on Wikipedia by making use of these images and other images. Do we want to introduce everyone briefly, or?
Not quite yet, because we're still pre-show, but we just want to encourage folks to know that you're in the right place. We are actually pre-show, so don't worry, you have not missed anything. We are actually just trying to get folks oriented so you have time to share out to your networks that you know that you're in a place. We are just running down some of the folks that we are getting from all over the world. So this is great. We have hundreds of folks from all over watching this on all different networks. As we mentioned before, we're using a system called StreamYard that allows us to broadcast this video and interaction to many different social media networks at the same time. So the three main ones are Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So you might be watching us on one of those three networks. You can respond to us in Twitter. You can respond to the thread in Facebook. If you're on YouTube, you can also chat back to us. If you're on Facebook, you do need to make one extra change so we can see you. If you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, that will allow your face and name to be shown if we bring them up on screen like this. So we would love to see folks from all over the world on the screen like this, and that makes a lot easier to see those things. So thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here. We are doing this first ever virtual edit-a-thon with the Met, and it's great to see so many folks with us. So again, if you don't have an account yet on Wikipedia, we encourage you to do that, because that'll make it a lot easier. Richard has just gone through how to register through that link right there, register.wikiseum.org. That is just for our edit-a-thon today. Or if you want to start looking at some of the topics, you can start to edit right away, or just peruse and look to see what kinds of things you can help improve. You can go to that link at the bottom of the screen that's scrolling. So that is just going to English Wikipedia, WP:/MetFashion 2020. So if you type that into the search box on English Wikipedia, you'll find the page there. And again, don't worry if English is not your first or only language. You can edit in any language you want. We encourage contributions across the board. Right, Richard?
Yeah, we have Wikipedia exists in about 300 different languages. You are encouraged to contribute in each and every one of them that you can speak comfortably in. You're also encouraged to translate if you like. So many articles might be in one language but not another language, and so you can do some translations. You can also help contribute to Wikidata, which we'll get into as well, which is sort of which is a way that we store information about artworks and about other topics. So who was the creator of this piece of clothing? When was it made? What was its influence, and what did it influence? Is there a dress, say, in a painting? And then say there's a dress in, say, a French painting. What type of dress was it? Who made the dress? Things like that. So you can say, Marie Antoinette is wearing this dress. Who made this dress? And where else is it represented? And we'll get into some of those topics with some people who are a little bit more expert on that later on.
That's great. And before we get started, maybe Jeannie and Maria, you want to introduce yourselves very quickly? We'll do another introduction of you, but why don't you tell us a little bit about where we are right now? So maybe Maria?
Right, exactly. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Kessler, and I work in digital partnerships at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I am absolutely ecstatic to see everyone joining on and helping to use our materials and the materials here to share global knowledge about the rich resources that the Met has in our Costume Institute. And we're also going to hear a little bit about our upcoming exhibition from one of our experts a little bit later on. I'm also here with one of my colleagues, Jeannie. So Jeannie, go ahead and introduce yourself too.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeannie Choi. I'm so happy to see so many people from around the world joining our edit-a-thon. This is our first virtual edit session, so we're so happy to have so many people from around the globe. I am part of the digital department, and I oversee our collection database and our collection information. And I've been working a lot with Wikidata. And our costume collection is one of the departments that has some of the fewest items on Wikidata. So I'm hoping there's some Wikidata people out there who will help us add more content to Wikidata. And I believe fashion in general, Andrew can correct me, does not have a great presence on the Wiki platform. So that's another reason we love doing these events. And our event last year on site at the Met was very successful. So we're really looking forward to
Great, thank you so much. So believe it or not, folks, that was all the pre-show. So that was all actually not officially part of the show. So thank you for joining us. We are so thrilled to have you with us. So we are going to start the show soon, and we're actually going to bring up our official, or not so official, but our banner here, and get ready to get started. So get your keyboards ready. We'll get started in a second. Hi there, welcome to the Met and Wikipedia editing meetup. My name is Andrew Lee, also known as User Fuzzheado on the English Wikipedia. I am the Wikimedia strategist for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I wanted to introduce you to the crew that you'll be working with today. We're so glad to have you here on the StreamYard feed of the Met and Wikipedia meetup. So I wanted to introduce Richard Nipel Jeannie Choi, and Maria Kessler. Hi, folks.
Hi.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, so if you did not join us for the pre-show, don't worry, we're going to go over everything here on how to create an account, how to participate in this first ever Wikipedia and Met virtual editathon. As you may know, Wikipedia has been around for 20 years. This is going to, 2021, mark the 20 years of Wikipedia being around. And in that time, it has done so much to engage with museums, libraries, and archives all around the world. That's a movement we sometimes call GLAM Wiki, galleries, libraries, archives, museums. And the Met has been one of the leaders in this area in working with the Wikipedia community to improve content in Wikipedia around art, architecture, and all different things that we see related to arts in Wikipedia. And this editathon is the first one that we're going to be holding in the virtual space. And we wanted to really thank you for joining us today. You're probably watching us on one of 3 different networks. You are probably seeing us on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope and Twitter. And the great thing about these networks is that you can actually talk back to us and tell us where you're watching from, or any questions that you have, we can bring them up. So for example, we can actually go in and see folks telling us they're from Florida or from Italy or from Germany and Portugal or from Argentina. So this is just so great to see this kind of interaction where this system that we're using can integrate all the different social media networks together so we can have this global conversation. So before I go further, I want to let Richard introduce himself and introduce us to the Met folks that we have with us.
Hi, I'm Richard Nipel, user Pharos on the Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects. I'm a Wikimedia resident at the Met, and I'm very interested today in helping us improve Wikipedia's coverage of fashion, which is extensive in some ways, but also very lacking in others. And I hope that by using some Med resources and some other resources, we can help come together and improve our coverage of fashion and tie it in with history, tie it in with other types of art. And work together on that.
Great. Maria, you want to introduce us to yourself and what we've been doing with the Met and Wikipedia?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Kessler, and I work in digital partnerships in the digital department of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I just want to say I am so thrilled that everyone is tuning in and logging on and helping us share global knowledge about Costume Institute. So thank you very much. We're thrilled. Last year we had our inaugural edit session on Met Fashion, and we were thrilled with the results. We had a room packed, but of course we're dealing with a pandemic this year, and we're thrilled that we could expand this, to the universe of fashion lovers out there. So thank you very much. We definitely want to contribute more. I would also like to take this moment that on our Wiki event page, we do have a number of resources. In particular, we have free resources from Watson Library. We have free press kits available, and we have publications. So if you look up Alexander McQueen, Savage Beauty, that was an exhibition that we did a few years back, several years back at this point. There's primary source materials in Watson Library about all the labels and all the information from that exhibition. We have the press kits available, and then we have a publication that includes lots of rich resources there as well. But I don't want to take up too much time. We definitely we have a fantastic discussion we want to share with you in just a few minutes from one of our colleagues in the Costume Institute. Jessica Regan is going to share with us a lead-in into our upcoming exhibition called About Time, Fashion and Duration, which opens at the Met on October 29th. We'll get to that in just a second, but I would like to introduce my colleague, Jeannie Choi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie. I work with Maria in the digital department. We are so excited to have this virtual edit session, and it's so exciting to see so many people from around the world. I'm seeing Switzerland, Tanzania, India, Japan, New Jersey, Grand Blanc, Michigan, Grand Blanc, I'm from Flint. So nice to see someone from my home state. I've been working a lot with Wikidata, so anyone interested in Wikidata, I hope you can create some Wikidata items around our collection. Our costume collection is one of the fewest, has some of the fewest objects on Wikidata from the Met, and these edit sessions are a great opportunity to add to that content. So I hope you all have fun. We're so happy that you've joined us.
I would just like to say, Andrew, we're trying to connect the Met YouTube channel. So we're trying to get that up and running. So if anybody has tried to click in there and found that as a frustration, I apologize. We'll try to get that redirected. We have someone in the background trying to do that right now.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And we'll try to get that sorted out. We do have, one of the nice things about having so many channels, we have some redundancies there, but hopefully you will see it. And I see that it seems to be working on the Met's YouTube channel, but maybe the chat back is not working as expected because I think restrictions on that. So you're welcome to go to the other channels that we might have in the link at the bottom. So if you go to WP:METFashion 2020, there is an alternate YouTube channel that we have for what we call the Wikipedia Weekly podcast network that we have. And that one should allow you to chat back into that channel. So you can watch on either one, but if you want to chat back, you can go to the alternate YouTube channel on the page that's described on the ticker below there. So thank you so much, Maria and Jeannie. They've been such great supporters of what we've been doing with the Wikipedia community. Richard has been working with them for many, many years, but it's so great to see that I think a few years ago, we start to see multiple museums and large cultural institutions see all the benefits of collaborating with Wikipedia. And it's just made both sides richer because of that collaboration. So I thought what we could do is to give you a little taste of what the Met is launching with their new exhibition. And we have one of the curators of that exhibit here to give you a talk about that. And let me go ahead and cue that up to make sure we have that ready for you. So as Maria said, this is Jessica Regan, is that right?
Yes, and she's one of our colleagues in the Costume Institute. She couldn't be here today, but this is a fantastic introduction. I hope you enjoy.
Great. And we're going to start with just a little bit of an introduction to the exhibit. It's about a minute long, just to show you a taste of it. It'll make it a lot more rich when you listen to her talk about this.
Hi, I'm Jessica Regan, Associate Curator in the Costume Institute. Thank you all so much for participating in this program today. We really appreciate everyone's efforts to improve the availability and accessibility of good, reliable information about fashion and fashion history. I'd like to share with you a brief introduction to the Costume Institute's upcoming exhibition about time, fashion, and duration, which traces a century and a half of fashion from 1870 to the present. The exhibition opens on October 29th, and I hope some of you will have an opportunity to come to the museum and see the exhibition in person. As you may know, 2020 is the Met's 150th anniversary, and About Time is one of a series of exhibitions created for this anniversary year that highlights the museum's permanent collection. So About Time draws primarily from the Costume Institute's collection of over 33,000 objects. So in developing the exhibition concept, the intention was to create an exhibition relating to the museum's anniversary year and to convey the depth and breadth of the Costume Institute's collection. But rather than present a simple timeline of fashion of the past 150 years, representing a straightforward accounting of changes in styles and silhouettes, Andrew Bolton, the Costume Institute's curator in charge and curator of this exhibition, created a disrupted timeline of fashion history from the museum's founding in 1870 to the present, emphasizing the relationship between past and present through juxtapositions of historical and contemporary fashion. So the timeline presented in this exhibition is structured according to two opposing concepts of time, one posed by the French poet and art critic Charles Baudelaire, and the other posed by the French philosopher Henri Bergson. Both individuals were writing about notions of temporality during the same era as the Met's founding. And this was a period that saw major developments in the global standardization of time and a growing understanding of time as regulated, measurable, and progressive, which fostered a culture that valued constant change. So Baudelaire, writing in 1863, described the experience of modern time as one of perpetual flux. And he saw the distinguishing characteristic of modernity as the ephemeral, the fugitive. So Baudelaire's notion of temporality is relentlessly forward-moving. And this is an idea expressed in the exhibition by a linear chronological timeline of 60 fashions from 1870 to the present, each in black to emphasize changes in silhouette. So the objects you see here are the first three in this Baudelairean timeline. In parallel, the exhibition represents Bergson's notion of temporality, which challenges binary distinctions between old and new and past and present. Bergson instead argued that time exists as duration, a continuous flow in which past and present coexist. So in the exhibition, Bergson's notion of temporality is presented through a series of 60 interruptions or disruptions that predate or postdate the fashions in the Baudelairean chronological timeline, but relate to them in terms of shape, material, technique, concept, or embellishment. And you can see the first three of these disruptions in the lower half of the slide. So together, these pairings illustrate Bergson's notion of the past coexisting with the present, and that fashion is not only about the ephemeral, the fugitive, but also the enduring. And so the exhibition unfolds in a series of 60 pairings, and I'd like to share a few of those here. The first is an American dress from about 1870, paired with a Schiaparelli evening dress from the late 1930s. And this pairing reflects the persistence of the bustle silhouette into the 20th century. While the 1870s dress relies on a separate understructure, a bustle, to support the amplitude of fabric at the back, in Schiaparelli's interpretation, the effect is created solely through the manipulation of fabric, but without any rigid understructure. Schiaparelli, like many other designers working in Europe in the late 1930s, as war approached, was looking for nostalgic, romantic inspiration and often turned to the late 19th century. Alexander McQueen took a more conceptual approach in responding to that period. And so he took as a starting point the princess line of the late 1870s. So that is a one-piece dress with vertical seaming extending from the shoulder through the skirt without a waist seam. And so this created a very form-fitting and long-waisted silhouette. McQueen radically reinterpreted the princess line with his bumster skirt, which was cut outrageously low on the hips. It revealed the lower back and the buttocks. And like the princess line, the bumster really changed the proportions of the body, creating the illusion of an elongated torso. And so this mining of the past that you see throughout the exhibition reveals a range of motivations and associations evident in all of these successive pairings. Here you can see a look by John Galliano on the right for Maison Margiela's Spring 2020 collection. And this references civilian contributions during World War I and World War II by quoting Red Cross uniforms of the period. And you can see an example of a Red Cross uniform from 1918 at the left. Galliano's deconstructed nurse's uniform includes a cape, a shirt, and a dress. And the dress is constructed with seam lines that suggest a pair of trousers have been taken apart and reassembled to form a skirt. So it evokes the make, do, and mend philosophy of wartime, but also the appropriation of a masculine garment. And so this expansion of feminine prerogative during the era of the Second and First World Wars. In this Norel evening dress from his fall 1965 collection, he pays homage to 1920s designs by Gabrielle Chanel. Norel at the time credited Chanel with having, as he put it, started everything in fashion that's current today. And so this interpretation of her sequined evening dresses of the 1920s, although quite direct, alters Chanel's proportions. So the abbreviated hemline, the narrow shoulder exposing straps create a very distinctly 1960s mode. And styles from the 1920s regained relevance for a lot of designers in the 1960s, when this bare-legged, straight-cut styles of the flapper era offered a vision of a kind of modern ease that seemed particularly suited to the youthful direction of fashion in the 60s. And I'm going to end with this pairing, one of my favorites. It's a Sarah Burton design for Alexander McQueen from a very recent collection, fall 2019, alongside an evening coat by Jean-Philippe Worth for the House of Worth at the turn of the 20th century. Both designs interpret what has been a long recurring motif in fashion, the rose. Worth does so through an opulent, voided silk velvet, and Burton through sculptural manipulation of the fabric. But both of them truly virtuoso efforts of their time. Thank you all so much again for participating in this event today, and I do hope that many of you will have a chance to come to the museum in person to see the exhibition and to see these objects in real life. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was a great talk by Jessica Regan of the Met. Maria, you want to tell us a little bit about what you thought of that? I mean, that's a great summary of that exhibit, right?
Oh, this is fantastic. And what a great opportunity for us to hear from the Costume Institute. That's absolutely a sneak preview. So we're just thrilled that we were able to get Jessica to provide that for us. There's a lot more materials you can dig into on the wiki page. the event page that is scrolling along the bottom. We hope we have something for everyone on the page. But I think now we're going to dig into how to do it, how to get started if you don't already know how to contribute.
That's right.
Back to you, Richard.
Yes, and we are going to show you very quickly what you are seeing scroll across the bottom of the screen there. So if you have not taken a look at it yet, this is the Meetup page for this session here. We encourage you to go there, and I know there's a lot of information there, but we tried to boil it down into the simplest things to get involved. And the most important thing is don't get too intimidated by what you see there. Almost everyone who's watching here has used Wikipedia in some way. We pretty much use it every day of our lives, but you may not have ever edited Wikipedia before. So we're going to walk you through how to contribute and be part of the Wikipedia editing community. One of the things that you might see right away that might be surprising is one of the things that Wikipedia is actually rolling out, and it made news this week, saying that Wikipedia is now getting its first kind of facelift or makeover. Like, I guess it's appropriate that this is the fashion editathon that we talk about, the skin or the decorations of Wikipedia changing. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is one of the changes you might see in Wikipedia. If you click on this little arrow, you can now collapse the bar on the left-hand side. So it's a lot simpler. So this kind of looks more like what you see on a mobile phone. So this is kind of nice that we get to simplify our view a little bit here. So we have a very quick 1, 2, 3 series of steps to get involved. You can sign up on the dashboard, which is the best way to go and to, in one stop, create an account and to get involved. And so we can see all the activities within the folks who are contributing today. And then the second thing is that we actually have a chat that you can click on here. You can certainly use the social media channels you're using now, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, but we also have a dedicated chat in case you want to chat with other Wikipedia editors and get more help, which is great as well. And then the third step is find something to do. And we have lots of things for you to do. We have content related to the exhibit that we have here. In fact, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole exhibition catalog for About Time, not the whole thing, but most of it is online already. That's pointed to by the Met. And we actually have the articles related to the designers there. We actually have here, when you see a red link in Wikipedia, it means it's completely missing from Wikipedia, and we actually could use your help in those areas. So you can improve the articles around the designers. We also have what we call stub articles in Wikipedia, meaning that they're very short. And if you look through these, there's some very important concepts in fashion that have very short articles in Wikipedia. And those are a great place to get started for editing. We also have requested images. So you can help us attach images in our collection to the articles. So sometimes it's not just a matter of we're missing the information. We have it. We just haven't connected it yet in Wikipedia. And the Met has joined many museums around the world of contributing their image collections under a free license. So a lot of those images are from museums from all over the world. And then if you go down further, we actually have this fashion glossary that Richard and other folks have helped assemble. We actually have many, many things that you can help with here. So there's no shortage of things to do, and don't be overwhelmed. We're going to walk you through some of those things shortly. But before we get further into it, I want to introduce one of our prolific editors in our Wikipedia community, Camelia Boban. She is the organizer and founder of this movement that we have in the community called Wiki Loves Fashion. So she is joining us from Rome, Italy, and it'd be great to hear from her and have her introduce us a little bit to the Wiki Loves Fashion project and global movement. And this is one of the events that are part of that. So hi, Camelia, are you there?
Hi everybody.
Oop, I think you muted yourself. There we go. Can we hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can't hear you for some reason.
Okay. So hello everybody. We are talking about Wiki Love Fashion, which is a campaign launched during the Wikidonia roadmap in 2018, but really starting the year after in 2019 in Florence and New York, organizing by Wikidon and then by Wikimedia New York. So we were hosted by Polimoda University in Florence, which is a very important university related to fashion. And we wrote about Elsa Schiaparelli. So we improved the article of Elsa Schiaparelli, which was a wonderful experience. We also had references. We wrote other articles, biographies, and so on. This year, Wiki Love Fashion is on the second edition and was organized in order to cover the Milan Fashion Week from 22 to 28th of September, and then the Paris Fashion Week from 28th of September to 6th of October. So we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of lists using Wikidata and the Listeria tool. We have a lot of names added by various projects like Wikidon and the project Fashion. And we have books that we shared with a group who want to start editing. So you have everything. You have no excuse to not write on Wikipedia about fashion. So this, yes, this is the page. You can you have the page when you can add your username on the participant list, and another thing maybe was said. You can choose to do something else as not writing on Wikipedia. You can choose to add a Wikidata item. You can choose to write something else on Wikiquote, or so you can use all the Wikimedia projects. So it's a cross-wiki project. So go.
Thank you, Camelia. And I think you made a great point in that, everyone knows about Wikipedia, but they may not know that in association with Wikipedia, there's so many other projects that help it keep going, right? You've got the images, we have the source materials, we have video, we have all kinds of stuff, right? So there's many ways to get involved.
Yes, exactly. Yes, this is a good point.
Thank you. And we are going to check in with you and others throughout the day to maybe get you to tour us through some of the things that that you've worked on, or to give some hints on how folks can get involved. So right now, I thought what we do is to toss it to Richard. So Richard is going to show you how to create an account and get involved. Even if you have an account already on Wikipedia, we'd love for you to join the dashboard so we can see the breadth of activity that's happening as part of this editathon. So Richard, I'm going to let you take it away and show us how to register and get involved.
Yeah, so we were inviting people to register on the dashboard. Unfortunately, it looks like we might have overloaded the dashboard with a record number of participants today. So we're going to do it a little bit easier. If you don't have a Wikipedia account yet, you should just create an account. So just click login here. Create account. Pick a username. Usually the style is to pick something fun. So my username is Pharos. It's the name of the Lighthouse of Alexandria. You can pick Mantua fan 27. You can pick bustle enthusiast, or whatever whatever fashion term or non-fashion term you might want to use. And once you create that account, we encourage you to go to the main account page. The main page for the event, and click the sign up button. Like I said, unfortunately, the dashboard is not working right now, but once you go here, you see this thing. This thing comes up once you're signed in, and you click publish changes, and your account is added to the last of it. We can help see what's going on with your account and help you if you have any issues coming up. I'd also, so you'll see your account has a is going to be red. So if you see this link to your name, it's going to be red at first. So if you click there, you can start a page for yourself. So you might want to try doing that now. You can link something. Just say something about yourself. You could say, something like I'm interested in fashion or whatever, and you can highlight a word and link to it, perhaps something like that. And then you would click publish page, but I'm not going to do that right now. Yeah, so I encourage everyone to create a Wikipedia account and then look at some of the options, and and Andrew and some others will show you how to start editing them.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And that's something that we highly recommend you do. One of the odd things about Wikipedia that you might know about is that you can actually edit without creating an account, which is absolutely fine. And that's one of the powers of Wikipedia, then why it grew so fast and has become so popular. But for this exercise, we'd love to have you register an account so we can help you out and to work with you on articles long term. So again, we are here getting ready to get into the deeper part of editing Wikipedia, but a lot of folks might be joining us right now. We're using a system called StreamYard, so you might be seeing us on one of 3 different networks, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or Twitter. So please feel free to tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing these folks from Israel, Argentina, Germany, Portugal. We normally do these edit-a-thons in New York City, and it's great that we're in the middle of one of the greatest cities in the world. But with this virtual edit-a-thon, we are reaching an amazing global community we've never seen before. And as Richard mentioned before, we might have accidentally overloaded the registration server for a tiny bit, which is good news. It's good to have good problems like that. But keep trying, or go into our chat, or send us a message, and we can help you out on how to make sure we have an account for you. So one of the things I thought we could do is whenever we add folks to the community and we start to train them on how to edit Wikipedia, one of the strange things that that you might not have thought of is, have we really taught you how to read Wikipedia? And so you've used the content quite a bit, but maybe you haven't used Wikipedia in a way that a lot of others have used before. So we thought we'd show you some of the features in Wikipedia that you might not have thought about. And as you start to think about being a contributor, you'll be much more mindful of these things. So this is the front page of Wikipedia that I'm sure a lot of people have seen before. But if we go to an article, and I'm going to go to one that's very simple, related to fashion, and I'm going to go to the article on frock coat. So this is an example of a very typical article in Wikipedia. And don't worry that I've got some special features turned on here that maybe further on in the edit-a-thon I can show you some of the expert tricks on how to turn on some of these features in Wikipedia. But you can see that this is an article that has some things that you might not have seen before. So one of the things that is great about Wikipedia, it's fairly transparent in terms of its deficiencies. So the first thing I'm going to show you in Wikipedia is how we like to point out when or how much you should trust an article. So you can see that the first thing here is this article needs additional citations for verification. So although this article is quite good and it's quite long and it's got great writing, you'll notice that there are entire paragraphs here that don't have any kind of references or citations. So in general, we don't like that. And if you read Wikipedia before, you notice that there's these little numbers next to every sentence or so. And we like to make sure that information in Wikipedia is referenced and that it comes from somewhere that's reputable. And that's why we like to see these citations. So if you do nothing else today, just adding references to articles is a really useful thing to do, whether it's the Met or other museums, to use those resources to back the writings that you have there.
And Andrew, I was just going to remind everyone again, that's exactly why we have the links at the bottom of the Wiki event page for 2020. Because those are primary resources. They were written about the exhibitions, about the topics within the exhibitions. So they're absolutely primary resources you can use.
Absolutely correct. And thank you for that, Maria. We try to provide you as many resources as possible, not just Met, but others, to help fill out these things. We haven't had too many fashion edit-a-thons, so this is great to see so many folks here get involved. So if you notice, the first sentence of this is what we call the lead sentence. And we try to make sure that this lead sentence has almost all the information you need. I know it's impossible, but this is the style that we use in Wikipedia. Sometimes it's called the inverted pyramid style. So there's 2 goals of the lead sentence. One, it's to try to summarize the topic as much as possible. If you had only time to read 1 sentence about this topic, is the most important information in this sentence. And the second thing we like to do, especially if the article is about a person, we like to assert notability. Like, why is this person in the encyclopedia? Why is this person notable enough for me to want to read about them? So for any kind of article in Wikipedia, we want to make sure these two things are accomplished, at least in the first few sentences, hopefully in the very first sentence, is, do I get the 10,000 meter or kilometer view of the topic? And also, does it make a point as to why this person or this topic is important, right? So that is really important, the lead sentence. So that's the lead sentence right there. And then everything else below that should be details or elaboration on that first sentence right there. On the right-hand side here, this article does not have it, but sometimes you'll see a very detailed info box. So if you read articles about sports figures or fashion models, you sometimes will see content on the right-hand side there that has a breakdown of, you know, when someone was born, where they went to school, things like that. So that's what we call an information box. As we go further down, we have the table of contents, which is automatically generated, right? So the cool thing about this is that this is automatically generated as people add sections to articles below. So don't worry about having to edit the table of contents. It's automatically made for you. So these are the major sections of a Wikipedia article. These are the subsections of Wikipedia articles, meaning it's level 1, level 2, level 3. And then if something is important enough to be broken out into another article, you will see that sometimes you'll see this, that there's a whole nother article about frock in general and not just the frock coat. Right? So that's a good rundown of what you'll see in a Wikipedia article. And when you're writing, you really want to pay attention to asserting the notability and getting the information into the first few sentences of the article. Now, as we keep going down, you'll see that we like to have images in Wikipedia, but we don't like to overuse them. So you'll notice that they're kind of put in the context of where the writing is, and we try to come up with good, high quality, representative articles for what we're talking about. So military uniforms, frock coat, and then other things that you'll see here going down. Now, as we get down to the bottom, we start to see some more interesting things. The thing that you might see is its use in popular culture or some contemporary uses. And then oftentimes, especially for fashion topics, you'll see a gallery. So this is where you actually will have not quite a pile of images, but more images that help illustrate the variety or the different cultures related to this topic. So there is a whole kind of aesthetic around what images do you put in a gallery. They don't want 500 images, but you want a nicely curated set of images here. Right? And then at the bottom, these are things that probably every college student knows about because this has saved you as you're writing your papers and you're doing your assignments. But the references are the gold of Wikipedia, right? This is what I sometimes call the pot at the end of the Wikipedia article. This is where you find the treasures of where all these folks have done all the research to say these are the most important reference works, whether it's books, news sources, online catalogs. This is where you can start your research. And then we also have up here other content in Wikipedia, the See Also section. So all of these things are completely legitimate to add to Wikipedia. You don't even have to write full sentences. If you just add references or add See Also and link articles together, that's really useful to have in Wikipedia. Also, as we mentioned before, that Camelia was talking about, we actually have links to other content within the Wikimedia universe that is related to frock coats. So you notice that you can click to this, which shows you all the images that we have in Wikimedia Commons, our multimedia repository related to frock coats. Right? So if you're looking for more images for the illustrating this article, you can actually go here and find the images related to frock coats. So there's an entire community of photographers and image catalogers in Wikimedia Commons. So that's another great place to get involved, especially for visual arts and fashion. The references here are auto-generated as well, and we'll show you when we start to edit how those things are made. And at the bottom, sometimes we do have a very traditional bibliography that is more like what you see in a paper bibliography or an academic paper. And sometimes you do have a mix of online references and paper references, but you can see that we actually have, the ISBN, the book numbers out here, so anyone can look these up in other databases. And then at the very bottom, I thought I'd show you the two last things that you might have seen before, but since one of them is not open by default, it's kind of easy to miss. So one thing that's interesting down here, these are what we call navigation boxes. And even Wikipedia veterans sometimes don't know what these are called, so don't feel bad if you've never heard of this term before. These are called nav boxes or navigation boxes, and there's a huge amount of benefit down here, but only if you click on the show button. So sometimes they're closed like this. So if you click on show, wow, look at that. So you suddenly see the whole expanse of what we have related to clothing. So this is kind of interesting that you can actually navigate to all the different content around clothing, or if you want to look at historical clothing, there's a whole different navigation box around historical clothing. So folks who are on social media, is this new to you? Have you found this useful before? Let us know in the social media, like, have you used these boxes before? Because I find these super useful, because sometimes you don't realize that people spend hours and hours of time cataloging how the article that you're reading fits into the whole of historical clothing or fashion. So these navigation boxes are very useful. It's not quite intuitive, but you can actually edit these things as well. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, we have VTE. What is that? That means you can view it or you can edit it. So you can actually edit these templates or these navigation boxes by hitting the E button. So we're not going to get into that detail right now, but just know that this is completely open to anyone editing as well. Not just the article, but this catalog of other stuff that we have here. And then at the very bottom of the article are categories. So these boxes here that we call nav boxes are pretty carefully curated. There are people who discuss it and talk about how to organize it, and is this a dress or a skirt, or is this that kind of cut or that kind of cut. But when you come to categories, this is much more freewheeling. These are pretty much like keywords. They are what we call a controlled vocabulary, that we want people to kind of use the same terms, but anyone can add these to any article, whether it's talking about 20th century fashion or it's 19th century fashion. Anyone can add these categories to different articles in Wikipedia. And even just categorization is a very valid thing to do during Editathon to create more content. So hopefully that gives you a view of a Wikipedia article. And without even editing, we've learned a lot about what it takes to create content by just reading an article with more of an eye towards what are the features that make it useful, and what have you been using in Wikipedia without even knowing what its names were in the past. So these are some of the main features of Wikipedia articles that you might not have known about. So Richard, anything to add to that in terms of whether knowing how to read Wikipedia helps inform you better on when you get into the editathon phase, right?
Yeah, Wikipedia is a gloriously imperfect resource. So knowing how to read it better makes, helps you learn a lot more about the topic, and it helps you find the little holes where you can help, the gaps where you can help fill it and make it a more useful resource. I would like to just let people know that the dashboard is working again. So you can, if you had problem registering before, you can create a Wikipedia account there. You can also we also made a little thing where you can help search images. Using that function. I'd encourage you to look at the talk pages, every page has a discussion page, so where people discuss if there's any controversy about a topic, and look for the gaps. Look for like little areas like this type of clothing. Where did it originate from? Where was it used? How did it develop socially and culturally? How was it used, in the context of gender, in the context of class? Was it revived? Is it in contemporary work? Does it draw on different cultures? There's a whole lot of history that can be packed into every fashion article. And the nice thing about Wikipedia is it's a multidisciplinary encyclopedia, so you can tie it into a lot of other social contexts. Right.
And for other folks who are watching us out there on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, feel free to let us know anything that you found helped you when you started editing Wikipedia. It'd be great to share some of your ideas on what are the tasks that you felt resonated or were easy to be introduced to when you started editing Wikipedia. Because what we're going to do now is try to introduce you to the minimum you need to know to edit Wikipedia. One of the things about Wikipedia now coming up on 20 years is that we have a lot of guidelines. That's a good thing in general, but it can be quite intimidating to folks who are trying to get involved with Wikipedia editing for the first time. So I thought what I'd do is introduce just the 4 basic concepts I think anyone should know about when getting involved with Wikipedia. And even if you don't edit Wikipedia ever, you'll appreciate it a lot more knowing that there actually is kind of a prime directive or a set of guidelines that Wikipedia editors abide by. And I know that there's a lot of popular talk out there saying, oh, should we trust Wikipedia? I know my professors banned it. They didn't ban it. But should we be using it? And I think after you know about the policies, you'll come to appreciate a lot more what goes into editing Wikipedia. It's not just anyone who edits Wikipedia, but that there's a lot of thought into these processes. So let's go over these 4 basic topics here. And Wikipedia editors like using acronyms. We write so much that it helps to shorten things, but it can be kind of impenetrable for outsiders. So the first one I want to talk about is if you were to talk about one major policy that everyone just needs to know about, it's what we call NPOV. Now, what is this crazy acronym, NPOV? NPOV stands for the neutral point of view. And after I explain it to you, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because how do you get hundreds and thousands of editors around the world to collaborate on stuff? And why is there only one article about statues and one article about paintings? Because everyone has to come together and come to some kind of consensus or agreement on what goes into that article. And the only thing that makes this work is if everyone agrees. The ground rules of participating in Wikipedia are you must write things from a neutral point of view. Now, everyone knows this is impossible, but as an ideal, it's really useful, right? Because what we say is try to write an article such that all sides can agree on what is in that article, right? So whether you are a vegan or not a vegan, or whether you're pro this religion or not this religion, can you describe that factually and in a neutral way so that people who believe it and don't believe it can agree on it? And you'll notice that if you look at Wikipedia's articles, this has worked quite well in that that's the reason why Wikipedia works, that you can, in general, read an article and say, you know what, I think the people who are for this and against it can agree that these are the facts and that these references are good and this is the basic description of what this topic is about, right? So whether it is a biography of a person, whether it's a painter, whether it is a fashion designer, just describing their life and their accomplishments and what they've done in a neutral way is super useful, especially in this day and age. So that's the first one, neutral point of view, NPOV. So what's the second one? NOR, and this means no original research. So how do you write things in a neutral way if anyone can just make up their facts? Well, that's why we have this next policy, meaning no original research. We need you to point to reputable places and writings and experts on what is the right set of facts around a topic, right? So it's not just Andrew's theory of painting or Andrew's theory of color matching. No, it has to be some reputable source for this, and it can't be original research. So that's why when people worry about folks writing Wikipedia, we're actually not writing that much. We're actually collating and mixing together what is already accepted writings out there. So we're sometimes called a tertiary source. We're not the primary, we're not even the secondary, we're the third level source trying to summarize the world, right? So that's the no original research. So to get that no original research, we need reliable sources, which is why that's the third concept here of RS, right? We need to point to good news sources. We need to point to peer-reviewed academic research. We need to point to Met conservators who've looked underneath the paint and found out, that is actually what's underneath the painting and not someone else's theory that they're just thinking about, right? We need science. We need good research practices and good, reliable academic content there, right? So that's the reliable sources part, which feeds into the fourth one, which is verifiability. Right. So at the heart of all of this is it's not someone's novel research. It's not someone's crazy theory. It's what is verifiable and putting down on virtual paper in Wikipedia. And then in Commons, which is our multimedia repository, verifiability is a little bit easier in that we can upload pictures, right? We have huge communities of folks who are taking pictures of fashion, monuments, architecture, nature, all these things. So it's much easier with a camera to say, I was there and there's a picture. But for writing, we need all these things. No original research, reliable sourcing, and to create verifiable content. So again, these are the kind of bedrock concepts that we have in Wikipedia. Sometimes it looks like a kind of a pyramid like that. This is the kind of the other inverted pyramid that we have in the Wikipedia community. And we have many other policies out there. If we go to the Wikipedia front page, we can find pointers to all of that. So if you go to Wikipedia here, we actually do have help. You have learn to edit and all those things. So we actually have many, many pointers to our policies and practices here. But if you remember nothing else today, I think those four are really important. Neutral point of view. Let's get the most inclusive information into Wikipedia and the most proven information that is in the right proportions, right? So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the social media chat. We're going to have a lot more training going on. But if folks are already familiar with Wikipedia, you can go ahead and start editing the content. Richard, anything else to add to that before we start showing people how to edit articles directly?
Oh, no, sounds good. It'd just be good if people want to don't be afraid to dip your toe in and start editing. Find a topic that you like. We have quite a big list, including works of fashion and a number of exhibitions as well.
Andrew, I was just going to add in that I did see a comment just a little while ago about textiles, and we do have a guest, Sarah, who could talk a little bit about textiles for us.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a great idea. So Sarah, let me bring you back to the front here. Yes, there we go. So Sarah is one of our amazing community members that recently gave a great talk about picnics, the history of picnics in art, which was incredible. But now we'd love to hear about her in textiles, because that is one of your specialities. And, you know, the Met does all kinds of stuff in textiles. I'd love to hear what your views are on textiles in the wiki world.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The Met has a textile collection that's almost unparalleled, at least on the East Coast. And I am very excited to see this exhibit from the Costume Institute. It's such a good prompt about fashion, whose like main concept, like the key feature is rapid and continuous styles of change, and then posing duration as a counterpoint to like continuous fashion production, I think can lead you in a lot of good directions on Wikipedia. So as you said, I'm a textile artist and a historian. I am also part of the Art and Feminism campaign that aims to address information gaps on the internet about gender, feminism, and the arts. So when I'm looking at Wikipedia pages, I'm paying special attention to the information that is left out but is relevant, and that can help address the things that we think are worthy of recording and things that we don't tend to think are worthy of recording. So at the bottom of the Meetup page, you'll see some kind of like suggested topics to start with. One thing that Richard and I were talking about a little bit yesterday was a thing that I've noticed happening on Wikipedia with a new page for cottagecore. Cottagecore is a style that kind of romanticizes country living. So it's about baking and outdoor chores and long, light cotton dresses in an empty prairie. So the cottagecore page on Wikipedia was first created in April of 2020, which seems relevant when you think about the height of the pandemic and people are isolated and having fantasies of country escapes. And you'll see a little bit further down on that page that the page mentions one particular antecedent, Marie Antoinette, who in the 1780s started spending more and more time at this ornamental model farm that was built in the grounds of the Palace of Versailles, the Petit Trianon. So this page mentions kind of like the dairy that was there and the farm and everything, but it does not mention the type of clothing that became associated with that practice, which is called variously the chemise à la reine, the robe de Gaulle, or the robe à la reine, none of which have pages on Wikipedia either. So that style was popularized by Marie Antoinette and invented by her dressmaker, a woman named Rose Bertin. But Bertin has a page on Wikipedia, which is remarkable for a dressmaker who tend to be anonymous in popular history. And that's kind of a gap that I would like to address on Wikipedia in general. And it also gives us like a chance to move content on Wikipedia, not just in terms of notable people or notable designers, but also in terms of technique or style or materials, all of which have like pages and categories on Wikipedia and tend to be less addressed by editors. So moving this page to a connection with muslin or sheer cotton or cotton production moving from like India to farther west, following trade routes and colonialism, that would be a great direction to take. I also think that cottagecore as a trend kind of moves this fantasy to the American West. It tends to be kind of like Western style dressing and kind of homestead style. So there are fashion connections there, and also fashion things that are left out that kind of could address the fantasy of an empty frontier. Like, what are the contemporaneous fashions of indigenous nations in the West? How can we address that there? What does Ojibwe fashion look like? What does Navajo fashion look like then? So when I am going to edit today, I'm going to try to link some of these things together, and I'm going to pay special attention to the gaps in information there that might be due to gender, race, or ability, or any other kind of marker. So non-white designers and techniques and styles that originate in the global South would also be great things to address today during the edit-a-thon.
Great, thank you. Thanks for such an interesting introduction to this topic. I had no idea, and the references are amazing, which is, you know, the escapist land of cottagecore from Marie Antoinette to Taylor Swift. Wow, that's quite a range, and that sounds like a great article to keep expanding.
I'll also point out that the Met has like open access images that relate to this subject. So like there's like an etching of Rose Breton, like a portrait that they've done. There are existing images on Wikipedia, like Vigée Lebrun portrait of Marie Antoinette in this dress. Like that kind of information can be added to the image too. That's
great. Thanks so much. That's such a great treat to find out about this. And this is what the edit-a-thons are for. You know, this is something I tell folks all the time, that there's no better way to learn about something than being forced to edit it, right? Then you really put your your mental concepts against the grindstone of research and critical thinking and verification, right? So,
yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And Richard, any update on signups and anything related to tech for the dashboard? I think everything's working right now.
Yeah, everything's working now. We were rescued by Sage Ross in the Pacific Northwest. Shout out to the Wiki Education Foundation for helping to host that tool, and for Sage for helping us on the weekends.
It's nice to know people in high places. We actually know the developer of that tool, and it's nice to be able to say, "Hey, or can you fix this tool for us live?" This is great.
Yeah, we're so popular that we're breaking the tool. So please, and you know, I think it might be. Feel free to take advantage of this opportunity to try to make a small edit to an article on fashion. I see some people editing about COVID-19 in the fashion industry. That's a nice contribution. If you want to do anything related to cottagecore, like Sarah and Marie Antoinette, anything about designers that have been undercovered, or that their work has not been as recognized as it should be, there's a lot of room for that on Wikipedia, and there's a lot of gaps on Wikipedia. So if you could help fill some of those gaps today, that would be an awesome. I
just wanted to add, Andrew, I said that there might be an appearance of Wiki Cake. I just want everybody to know that we typically have a Wiki Cake, and I have Wikipedia, and I have the Met. The Met. So that's my appearance of Wiki Cake. I'll enjoy it. I hope you guys at home have some Wiki Cake too. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we have a tradition of Wiki Cake. It started at our we have a birthday event in New York every year for Wikipedia Day for its birthday in January. We're just coming up on the 20th anniversary this coming January 15th, and the event is hosted by my friends and colleagues at Wikimedia New York City. And it was so gracious of Maria to make one of the cupcakes, the Wikimedia New York City cake. And of course, New Yorkers are welcome to participate in Wikimedia New York City's events, which are local, but I mean, right now they're global.
That's great, and this is something that we'll let folks look into as well. You can actually look in the Wikimedia Commons, the whole gallery of Wikipedia cakes over the years and across different locales. So that's really something that is amazing to see. You know, all the folks different takes on the Wiki Cake. So yeah, that's something that we're going to take a look at in a second. Is the image repository, but let me show you what it looks like on the screen right now for the dashboard. This is the dashboard that you might have seen while signing up. And the nice thing about this, it allows us to look at all the different articles that are being edited and the content. So it's great to see different folks editing already in this area. And it allows us to get a nice feel for how many folks are involved here. So you might see your name in there, and we'll check in occasionally over the next hour or so to see what's there. So let's take a look at the actual editing of articles. And this is something that if you've never done before, it's not that hard, but it helps to have some guidance in that area. So let's go ahead and take a look at the article that I had taken a look at before, which needs some help. So if you look here at coat dress, this is an article that should be longer because it's actually only that long. So Jeannie, what do you think? We could probably improve this, right? Yeah. So I'd say coat dress deserves a little more content here. So one of the things that you'll see here is that it's just one paragraph here. This is generally what we call kind of a stub or start class article in Wikipedia, meaning that it's okay, it gives you a general idea, but we'd love to find more about this. And we generally recommend you look at other folks out there in terms of articles of similar type, of other addresses, of other things like that. And you can see what kind of sections they have and what kind of references they use, because you might be able to borrow from those articles. So let me first show you the two main different ways to edit the article and different things that you should note. Now, the two features we didn't show you in an article are these two buttons up here, the edit source and view history button. So a lot of folks know about the read option. You probably have even seen the edit option, but you can actually edit the article and also look at what we call the talk page as well. So first, let me go to the talk page. I'm not sure there's going to be much here. There's not going to be much on this page, but this is actually a page that is associated with every article in Wikipedia that is kind of like the behind the scenes discussion for any page. So you can raise issues like, hey, should this article be renamed to something else? Or shouldn't you add these sources? Or I think this sentence is too long or should be removed. So you can start to discuss with other folks there. But in general, we invite people just to be bold and go in and just change things. And then people might talk about those changes later on the talk page. So definitely get familiar with the talk page that's there. The other thing that you want to take a look at is the view history button. And this allows you to look at every single version of this article back to when it was created. And this is what's so unusual about Wikipedia. Unlike other websites where you're not sure when something changed, and you can only look at the last version, Wikipedia is very transparent that you can look at every single version that has ever been saved of this article. So you can see that this was created in 2013. And it was started with this content. A coat dress is a woman's dress that resembles an overcoat, etc. And you can see every date that it was changed. If the user is registered, you can see their username there. And you can see a very brief description of what has been changed, whether it is content that's been added, which you'll see in green, or content that's been subtracted in terms of a red color there. So even that is just a really useful scan of an article just to see how many changes it's been through and how many people have edited that article. Now let's get to how do you edit the article itself. And I saw a message in the chat, which is a great message, great question, saying, well, don't we have to worry about copyright and where we get information from? Absolutely. So when we talked about reliable sources and verifiability and bring things in, you cannot just copy paste content from the web. You cannot just download a picture from Google image search and upload it to Wikipedia. There are copyright ramifications for everything that we do. So in general, for writing, unless the source you know is very old, like more than 100, 200 years old, we have different guidelines for different jurisdictions, or it's public domain. So if it's a writing of like the US government, in general, those are public domain and you can copy and paste them. But most of the stuff you find on the net is not public domain. So you do not want to copy paste content. But the information contained in text is not copyrightable. So you can summarize the information you find, right? So if you do find the history of the coat dress in Vogue magazine, if it's old enough, you can copy paste it, but most of the time you want to summarize and to paraphrase it. And that's what we do in Wikipedia. So there's two main ways to do this. One is there's a edit button, which will get you this. And this is what we call the wiki markup code. Now this looks kind of scary, right? It is a code that you should probably learn at some point for discussion pages, but we really don't need to learn this code. We can actually pull down this pencil button and go to visual editing. So for most folks, you will probably see on new accounts the fact that we have an edit button and not an edit source button. The edit button will get you to this visual editor. But if you ever find yourself in that markup mode and it looks kind of scary, just go ahead and click on the pencil icon and make sure you're in the visual editing mode. And the nice thing about this is it just feels like using Microsoft Word or Google Docs or WordPress. It's actually very simple to edit these things. And the same type of things that you'll see in any kind of toolbar, you'll see what we have here. Okay, so for example, if we have something that we want to bold or not bold, you can select the content here and then choose whether it's bold, italic, or anything like that. And our style that we have in Wikipedia is that the main article title we want to bold there, and then we want to leave the rest in normal text unless you have publication names in italics, things like that. Then the other thing that I think is useful, most of this is pretty self-explanatory, it's the citation. So let's go ahead and do a quick search for something related to coat dress. So let's say we wanted to find something related to coat dress, and I'm going to look up a news source, since a lot of the things that people are going to be editing might be related to current events, and you might look in Google News. So one of the nice things about Wikipedia is it can take a link that you send it and try to make a citation automatically out of it. So for example, if I'm over here and I wanted to add something to this statement here, or I just found an article about Kate Middleton and a burgundy coat dress. So let's say I'm adding it here. I haven't typed the sentence in yet, but I'm just going to show you how the citation tool works. You can click on Cite right here, and you have some options. And this is kind of the bedrock of Wikipedia editing, that anything you add, you should have a reference for. The nice thing now is we have this tool, which is the automatic citation tool. So if you click here and you paste in the link, this is the link to the Town and Country magazine link right there. And I hit generate. I'm going to cross my fingers, so I'm not exactly sure. Look at that. That's perfect. So it has gone out to the website. It has scraped it for you automatically. It says, okay, here's the author, here's the date, here's the town. And it's done, I think, a perfect job. And I didn't plan this. This is really good news. For major sources like New York Times, for USA Today, it'll do the right thing. For some smaller sources out there, it might mess up. So you might need to adjust things. That's not bad. You can actually say insert that. And you can see this is a fully formed citation right there. But if you want to edit it, you can. You can click on the edit button here and go and edit last name, first name, source date, and the title, all this stuff. You can even add more fields if you want by going down here saying add more information. Okay, so this is really nice to have. And the cool thing about this is that is adding something for a website. You can actually hit the cite button and look at this. You can type in a DOI, ISBN. So these are identifiers that librarians and researchers use all the time. If you just put in the ISBN or the link to the scholarly database, it will grab all that information automatically for you. So adding citable content is as easy as it's ever been in Wikipedia now. So that's something that we've been really lucky to have in this tool. But you can always do it manually by inserting the content for something like a physical book that doesn't have an online presence, or you can reuse a citation, right? So if you found this big book that has lots of information, you can actually go in and keep clicking on different things here to reinsert another pointer to that reference there. So we can reuse citations within this document. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good summary of how citations work. I'm not going to go ahead and save that, but if I were, this is just pretend right now, I'm going to hit the Publish Changes button right here. And what we want you to do when you save is to add an edit summary. And this is a nice way of telling other folks in the Wikipedia community what you're doing without having to inspect every single edit that's being made. So what I could do here is say, added info about Kate Middleton, coat dress from Town and Country. So the longer and more friendly this is, the better. And we like for our folks to try to describe what they're doing here. And then if you want to keep track of this page going forward, you can click on Watch This Page. And then if you think it's a minor edit that people shouldn't go out of their way to really check deeply, you can say this is a minor edit if you're adding a comma or something like that. But you can just keep that unchecked. And then you hit Publish Changes, and then that will go into the edit log. So let's go back here and see. I didn't actually commit that change, but your change would show up right in here in the edit history of the article then. Okay, so those are the basics. You know, and we don't like to over-instruct folks. That is just the most basic way to contribute to a Wikipedia article. Hit that edit button, go to find the reference, and insert that content after typing in your sentence. You can also go to the talk page, and talk pages right now don't have the visual editor, but you can now always go in there and say, you know, just type in like you would in normal English. You can go in here, and I'll just go ahead and say this thing, editing this article as part of the Met Wikipedia editing meetup. Good times. And I'm going to go ahead and sign my name. And the way to sign my name is just to put 4 squiggly marks or tildes. I know that's a key you almost never hit, And we're going to ask you to hit it 4 times in a row to sign your name. But that's what happens when I sign my name. I'm going to say added a message. And I am going to commit this. I hit publish changes, and you will see there's my message, and then there is my name expanded out there. So that's how we kind of sign things in the Wikipedia universe, whether it's your own talk page to your personal talk page or the talk pages of articles. So for example, I'm going to go here to my talk page. It says I have messages, and you can see messages that maybe other people have left me. I don't know. Does anyone sign their messages anymore? There's some people sign their messages here. There we go. So here's someone who signed a message there like that. So that's basically all you need to know to start editing. So what I thought we could do is just get people to start editing the contents there. We can walk you through some of the editing of real articles, but at the same time, feel free to go off and do your own thing. So this is kind of like the open part of the edit-a-thon here, where we want folks to go off and start editing, but we also want you to, in social media, tell us what you're editing. So if you're editing stuff or you have questions, feel free to send it to Facebook or YouTube or Periscope or Twitter, and we can answer those or address some of those things. Or if you've done something you're proud of, send it to us and we can bring it up on screen and show you those things, because we'd love to showcase some of the things that you're working on. So let me go back to our main page. And Richard, anything to add before we tell folks to go off and start editing, and we can do some side training while people can kind of keep working and either tune us out or tune into what we're talking about?
Yeah, I just encourage people, if adding one sentence, adding one reference to Wikipedia is a contribution. It's a very useful contribution. So please feel free to do that. If you like, I think I shared this before, but it didn't get a lot of attention. But if you want to search for images that you might use to illustrate some articles, this is a little search that takes you to a search of Wikimedia Commons, so you can find some Met images that might illustrate different types of fashion. And if you have any detailed questions you want to go back and forth, this is a little chat program that you can use. So you can, have say one-on-one questions you might want to ask. Particularly if you're, some people have been asking them in the general feed, which is great. Some people have been asking about Greek fashion, and Greek fashion there may be some connections between classical Greek fashion and what is the vernacular worn in the islands today, which is great. I saw some people have been editing about COVID-19 fashion. There was an article about indigenous American art and some responses to it with the form of masks by a magazine exhibition. People have been asking about a whole bunch of different things, and so we want to we're coming sort of from the Met Museum, but we want to support all sorts of fashion that you want to improve on Wikipedia. So feel free to make an edit or a change anywhere. Just add a sentence, add a reference, and post about it on the social media if you like.
Very good. Thanks so much. And we can walk through some examples of how to go down these stub categories. But again, maybe we can make a little banner at the bottom saying to folks, we expect you folks to keep editing, but we're here to give you some comfort, some encouragement. We'll also walk through some examples. But at this point, it's kind of like a gymnasium or like a weight room. You can go off and do your weights, or you can pay attention to the class happening at the other end of the gym. But we like that kind of model of folks being able to try things out, but also bounce back into this room and send us a message either in the chat or the social media feed, and we can bring up either stuff that you're working on or answer any questions that you have. The question about copyright is a great one. It's one of the more complex things once you start getting more involved with our community in terms of, can I copy this? Can I download this? Can I upload it? It's for images, it's not that easy, but maybe just a quick one for Jeannie and Maria. One of the things that the Met did 3 years ago was this open access initiative, right? And a lot of museums have done this. And can you tell us a little bit about what is the open access initiative and why is it a big deal? I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much. Open access was we put over, at the time it was 375,000 art images into the public that we considered to be into the public domain under Creative Commons Zero license. So that's really just a notice that there's no copyright associated with them. They're free to use in any way, shape, or manner. We've added to that. We actually have over 406,000 art images available now. We have an API. You can find it on GitHub. We also have a CSV file, and they are usable for, we added a number, over 300,000 on Wiki Commons. So these are available for your use. They also have basic data associated with them. So you can slice and dice if you're interested. So it's absolutely available. Jeannie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that unfortunately, a lot of the contemporary clothing in our collection, unfortunately, is not public domain. So those images you probably will not find on Commons. But we do have a lot. We still do have a lot of images that are.
Absolutely. And just, Sarah, I think there was a request just for how to reach you or what your last name was.
Yeah, I'm working through this with Richard. I don't see a way to publicly comment. I can only public comment in our private chat, but I'll do that. My name's Sarah Klugich, and I'll post some links to textile.
Yeah. Maybe in the event page, we can leave if you're comfortable, leave a message, leave a link to your user page or whatever information you can leave there.
Link to Dilettante Army if you like.
Right. Okay, great.
Okay, great.
So again, folks, feel free to stay. We hope you'll stay, but feel free to keep working. But we're here to help you out. We've got some great questions here about what citation format do we use. We kind of, we use our own format for holding the citation, but you can actually generate that citation to any different, many different types of formats like MLA or different styles like that. But the weird thing about Wikipedia being not an encyclopedia of just science or psychology or medicine is that it's kind of like the world's information, the sum of all human knowledge in one database. So we actually have different citation styles for different types of articles, whether they're medical or fashion related. And it's not always easy. And so you hit upon something that's really interesting in that we do have, I wouldn't quite say conflicting, but trying to find ways to overlap and to live in the same space for references and for citations. And Mark Yeager, good question. We didn't even formally introduce Wikidata. So it actually might be a nice first thing to do is to talk about Wikidata. So thank you for that question, Mark. This is why I love this platform, that we get questions from all over the world and different social media platforms. You don't have to just be a Facebook user or YouTube user. We're getting lots of questions. So Jeannie had mentioned Wikidata before, and that's probably something that gets museum folks and librarians as excited or maybe more excited than Wikipedia in many ways. So I'm going to give you a very quick scan of it, but I'd love for Jeannie to jump in very quickly as to why, especially for what she does with the Met and for folks that she knows in the museum world, why Wikidata itself has become kind of its own center of gravity in many ways, and a whole area of interest that is kind of born on Wikipedia but has an entire community of its own. So the kind of 3-minute overview of Wikidata, if that's possible, is to say that it is the structured database that now is derived from, but also supports Wikipedia. So what does that mean? A structured data. So I think the easiest way to look at it is if you look at a page on Wikipedia, right? So I'm going to go to the page on, let's say Henri Matisse, right? Or we should go for a fashion designer next, but let me just show you what this looks like. So if you have, especially for biographies, we just talked about the information box. So notice that all this content on the right here is almost like an info card, right? If you look up Henri Matisse or any kind of person on Google search, you're going to find the basic facts, where they were born, where they died, who they're married to, all this information. Believe it or not, on Wikipedia, this is kind of regular, but it's really not. It really is just someone writing it on a page. So let me just show you that for proof. We kind of have a template of sorts like this. So we can kind of maybe get the name, but we have the 1913 here. We try to structure the date of birth and everything, but this is just for display. This is actually not a database. So it's not easy to go into Wikipedia and say, show me all Impressionists that were born in the month of November. You can't do it in Wikipedia. You need to find some kind of weird program to scrape all this stuff and find out, is there 11 in this field? It's not something you can do with Wikipedia. Now enter Wikidata. So if you go to Wikidata, and we actually have a way to enter Wikidata from Wikipedia, it's kind of hidden in plain sight. So if you didn't realize this, if you're on the Wikipedia article, we actually have a link to the Wikidata item right here. And the cool thing about this is it now links to this. So this is kind of like almost like a bare facts card about Henri Matisse. And you'll see that, strangely, we say he's an instance of human, but that's really important to know. This is a human being. Here's a photo of him. This is the information about gender, about country, about the given name. So all of this looks like it's the same as what's in Wikipedia, but this is what we call structured. This is what we call controlled vocabulary. It's just not, you can't just type in anything that you want. These all have to be resolved and agreed upon by the Wikidata community, right? So you'll notice that the date of birth here is actually mathematically stored as a number in the database. So with Wikidata, you actually can say, show me all Impressionist painters that were born in November, and it'll come back in like a second. You can say, show me all female mayors of cities greater than 100,000 in the last 50 years. It'll come back in 3 seconds. You cannot do that with Wikipedia. And that's kind of where the magic of Wikidata comes. So I'm not sure if that is enough to whet your appetite about what Wikidata provides, but you can start to see that although Wikidata could never be all of what Wikipedia is, right? Wikipedia has interpretation of stuff. It's got writing about what critics thought about his work and all these things. But a lot of the basic stuff we can store in Wikidata, and amazing things can happen with this. You can do querying, you can do timelines, you can do maps, you can do diagrams, and maybe, Jeannie, we can show them later on about the knowledge graphs you can make out of this thing. But Jeannie, why is Wikidata kind of interesting to someone like you? And you're like the master database maintainer of the Met. Like for the GLAM world, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, what is the Wikidata relevance, do you think?
I think of two things. I'm a data geek, so I love Wikidata. Spend a lot of time putting our content on Wikidata. One of the main things is it's translated. All the properties are translated. So once our records are on Wikidata, it's pretty much automatically translated in however many languages people have translated properties. The other reason we love Wikidata is that it gives us the opportunity to connect our data set to other museum data sets, other GLAM data sets. So our content is much more searchable and probably potentially greater use, because if you wanted to find, all the works by Matisse or all the works by Michelangelo, once it's in Wikidata, it's can be a lot more useful. So we're hoping to collaborate with other GLAM institutions to sort of get our content on there. And I'm enjoying working with the Wiki community because we're finding some properties don't exist. Our collection is very complex. We have very complex ways to describe our works. Things like describing weights, dimensions, artist attributions. It's still not perfect. We can't get all our content on there, but we are working very hard. And also, it's constantly being pulled by search engines. Andrew and I did an experiment earlier this year when we created a brand new Wikidata item along with a Wikipedia article. It was picked up by every search engine within minutes. So the search engines are constantly looking at Wikidata, and it allows us to get our content more discoverable.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeannie. I mean, there's so many benefits that it's hard to describe in one sitting. But as Jeannie said, all the major search engines, Google, Bing, Amazon, Alexa, they are all, if you've never heard of Wikidata before, they all know about it because they're jacked into Wikidata. And as we said, we've done experiments where we said, oh, okay, these search engines have nothing about this artwork. Let's insert it into Wikidata, Wikipedia, and see how 2 minutes later, it's in all their databases. And we've talked several times to other folks in this space saying, you can't even pay Google money to get something in there within 2 minutes, much less make it happen. So that's how powerful Wikipedia and Wikidata are today, in that all the major knowledge portals, whether they're search engines or voice assistants, are using Wikidata and Wikipedia in ways that are amazing. And as Jeannie said, I didn't even talk about it, look at the multilingual nature here, right? So if we look at something related to this editathon, like Jean-Paul Gaultier, you can see his name in all these languages, right? And different scripts and things like that. And this is what's beautiful about it, in that if you were to say, oh, what is Jean-Paul Gaultier's name in Chinese? Oh, well, it depends on if you're in this country or that country. There's one way to write it and there's another way to write it. And then how do you match up all these things? And Wikidata is the central hub saying, no, Jean-Paul Gaultier in the Wikidata world is known by this identifier. So, the same way that books have ISBNs, or that you have these identifiers uniquely identifying someone, Wikidata has this unique identifier. And we're seeing this identifier being used in amazing ways. I mean, Jeannie herself, you've just started using this in the Met database recently, right? Yeah, so we
store all the Wikidata IDs for both our object records, our artist records, and all our subject tags, which we enter as depict statements in Wikidata. So, which is then part of our included in our API. So anyone using our API could easily get those IDs and use it in Wikidata queries.
Right, that's great. And this, we're seeing that not just small but large organizations are starting to use the Wikidata identifiers like this as unique identifiers to what we call disambiguate things, right? To make sure, oh, that is that person. So especially for fashion, well, now we can really get into the deep parts of the fashion domain, is that we have Jean-Paul Gaultier as the designer, but we also have Jean-Paul Gaultier as the design house, right? So we actually have the same name referring to two different things. And that can get really confusing if you don't have identifiers to say, are you talking about the designer? Or are you talking about his house or his firm? And we have this problem all the time. But if you use these unique identifiers, you have much less confusion, because you know whether you're talking about the person, the instance of human being, as we saw down here. Are you talking about an instance of human being, or are you talking about an instance of fashion house? And now you start to see the power of the database specifying exactly what is there. Because you'll notice in Wikipedia, we kind of have that as a fuzzy thing. Like sometimes we'll have an article for both the designer and his fashion house, and that probably shouldn't be the case. They should be separated in that way. Okay, so that's a longish answer to the, can you tell us about Wikidata? But there's a whole universe of cool things you can do in Wikidata. And as Jeannie said, especially for multilingual content, it's been a godsend, because we can consolidate all the different names and transcribing of his name in different languages all in one place. And before we had Wikidata, it was scattered among the 200 editions of Wikipedia, and you'd had to do some work to get all that information.
I also wanted to say, if you're new to wiki editing, Wikidata is a great place to get your feet wet. That's how I started editing. Very easy to add things like dates or dimensions or references. If you want to sort of just get used to how the wiki platforms work.
That's a great point. And just to give you an example of how editing Wikidata is a little bit different. So I'm going to go in here and hit the edit button. So notice that we have edit buttons everywhere. So unlike Wikipedia, where you had one big edit button and you just edit the whole article, each of these discrete, what we call statements in Wikidata, you can edit independently like this, right? So you can actually go in here and say human, and you just can't type in anything. So notice if I come in here and I say, I try to mistype human, I can't. I'm restricted to what is in Wikidata already, right? So if I go in here, you need to match what's in Wikidata already. So this is much more rigid and directed than Wikipedia, where you can type in anything that you want, right? So normally we have a list of things that are typical of what you'd see in the instance of field there. So I can go ahead and do that and change the different statements in Wikidata like that. Okay, so we might be able to come back to this later on to talk more about Wikidata and fashion, but there are a lot of cool things that we can do with that. So let's go back to the main project page. And again, this is the working time. So folks, feel free to keep working on stuff. Take a look at the dashboard to check out what kind of content you can be changing. Let's go ahead and check in on the dashboard, see if we see any more edits. We're getting more words added, getting more references added. That's great to see.
We had a nice Wikidata contribution I might want to share.
Yeah, where's that?
So let me just share it right now. So Bonnie Cashin, American designer, one of the leading originators of American sportswear. And if you see on the left-hand side of every Wikipedia article, there is a link for the Wikidata atom. And this Wikidata atom has been worked on by a New Zealand-based Wikimedian, Shoban, who is participating today and added a bunch of more information about Bonnie Cashin. You'll see that there are like several dozen changes that have made to this Wikidata item, adding a lot of biographical information. So a lot about
Nice.
about sources, about their occupation, about the given name, about place of birth, and has works in the collection. That's a nice property that I like. Has works in the collection, so it's a way to query, an artist who has works in a particular collection, and they might not necessarily have an item for each work, although we want that eventually. But at least in the meantime, we can say that we can query people who have works in different collections, and you can do all sorts of analyses of there, different awards received. So that's a nice contribution.
Very nice.
To that project. Great
to see. And I thought we had a nice comment here, which is worth bringing up because we brought it up a little bit before. So this is some from Sharon. Wikipedia might want to contact the American Association of University Professors to pursue a policy change to their membership. Wikipedia still gets banned by high school and university teachers. Well, yeah, that's kind of true, but not really. But just some background. Richard is on the board of the Wiki Education Foundation, which works with university professors all the time. And I think he's got some pretty good perspective on this. But I think in general, and I used to be a university professor for more than 15 years, and I was one of the first ones to use Wikipedia in the classroom. And I think there is a myth around university professors ban Wikipedia. It's actually not the case. Maybe I can ping both Jeannie and Maria's knowledge about this, but when we were, I think, students in high school and college, we were never allowed to cite World Book, Britannica, Compton's, Encarta. We were never allowed to cite any general purpose encyclopedia. So if a university professor is saying you may not cite Wikipedia, it's not because it's Wikipedia, it's because it's a general encyclopedia, and they're right to ban the referencing of it as the reason why the statement exists in your research paper. But in terms of using it, absolutely use Wikipedia. Use it all the time. Look at the references section we talked about. Go to the bottom. There's great research already done for you, right? So I like to tell folks that, a Library of Congress librarian came up to me and she said that really annoys her that there's this mythology that university professors ban Wikipedia. And she gave me that excellent line saying, don't cite Wikipedia because it's Wikipedia. Don't cite Wikipedia because it's a general encyclopedia. And we don't like that as professors in research, right? Yeah. Right, Jeannie? Like general encyclopedias, not citable, right?
Yeah, and hopefully people can help improve Wikipedia. So what the Wiki Education Foundation does, and what a lot of other people have been doing around the world, is encouraging students to work on Wikipedia articles and other Wikimedia projects as part of an assignment. So say in lieu of a term paper, to help improve, to do some research, to look at the sources, to look at the journal articles, to look at the books that have been published on a topic, and help improve the Wikipedia articles and produce something that is a little bit of a lasting contribution that people can read and work on later, a little bit like people are doing today as part of the editathon.
Right.
Rather than taking from Wikipedia, you can also give to Wikipedia. And it's Wikipedia, we like facts. So if you have some facts to share, that would be awesome.
Right.
Andrew, I just wanted to add from the museum's perspective, we've learned so much. It's so interesting to see where the images of our works of art appear on Wikipedia articles. Things we would have no idea or we would never think, like the pineapple article. If you go to the pineapple page on Wikipedia, there's an image from our collection. It's a very sort of delicate shawl, and it's because it's made out of pineapple fibers. If you go to the Down syndrome page, there's a painting in our collection on the Down syndrome page. The economy of Japan, things well outside the context of art history, and that's why we love seeing the use of our collection in these new ways.
That's a great point. Like we were just looking into this the other day, and for some reason, we're like, pineapple was like you wouldn't think that art museum and pineapple were in the same category. And then we realized that this as Jeannie said, this image of an amazing thing made of pineapple fiber was on the pineapple page, and that had got a lot of traffic and people were interested in looking at it, which is quite fascinating. So this is certainly a valid thing for an article. I don't know if we have pineapple fiber as an item in Wikidata. So if someone wants to do that.
Yeah, if any pineapple fiber enthusiasts, if anyone's been trending for, they want to, really promote their favorite textile, this is your chance.
Yeah.
If something is a textile, I mean, someone mentioned like different textiles, like, can I write an article on this textile if I don't have a free photograph? Yes, you can. Please do. Any textile as far as I'm concerned, any textile in the world should have an article on Wikipedia. So any basic technique, any type of clothing, maybe not like every, individual company, but we want to focus on like techniques and styles and materials. And if you have some of that, please, Wikipedia would love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Sharon, for that question. That's a great question. We get it all the time. And it is confusing. It's we use the terms cite, reference, use, research, all kind of loosely. So sometimes it's very confusing. And, I used to, when I was talking about Wikipedia at universities, I had professors all the time come up to me after I gave a talk and go, by the way, I use Wikipedia. I'm like, you don't have to whisper. You don't have to be shy about it. You absolutely should be proud of using Wikipedia. And Richard works with an organization that advocates for the use of Wikipedia in the classroom at universities. So it absolutely should be used. And, Jeannie and I have been to all these museum conferences for the last year or two. It's all about how to connect collections, and Wikidata is at the center of those conversations all the time. Great. Thanks for the comments from folks. Keep them coming. What are you working on? Tell us what kind of articles or things that you're working on. We had a great comment from Diane Shaw here, who's one of our great contributors from Washington, D.C., who works with the Smithsonian. I'm going to add references to English Wikipedia on the Paris Fashion Museum at the Palais Galliera. Oh, that's great. So one of our Wikimedia community member said pineapple fiber equals Q342. So we do have a Wikidata item for pineapple fiber. That's great. And he said it's being used for vegan leather. Wow, I did not know that. That's great. I don't think we have an article though about pineapple fiber, but that would be quite interesting to see, especially if it's gotten a modern day revival there. I don't know if you've looked into this, Jeannie, but he also had a question about how does pret-a-porter fashion get modeled in Wikidata? Any idea?
Pret-a-porter, I have not. I'm going to start because we have so few objects on Wikidata from the costume collection. So I'm going to follow up on that. I am not sure how pret-a-porter is. Yeah. I hope pret-a-porter is a term in Wikidata. I hope it already exists. That's ready-to-wear fashion.
Right. I'm pretty sure it is, but I haven't seen much work around it from what I last saw. Yeah. So, right, this is kind of, as you said, one-off versus, a whole line. But as you said before, Jeannie, it's like, because of copyright, it's a little bit, sometimes unsatisfactory to look at modern fashion because we can't have a lot of those images. But historical, pre-1900s fashion, it's pretty nice to have those collections on there. Let's see. Any other selections here? Otherwise, we might be able to show folks how to start with the category of what we call stub articles and get involved with those. Any other questions you saw there, Richard, that we can surface? But keep them coming. Tell us what you're working on, and we can also bring them up. Or if you have any questions on an article, let us know. We can bring it up and maybe co-edit with you. Let's see. Let's go to the main page here and show you where we recommended folks get a start with. So as you saw up here, we said sign up on the dashboard. If you're coming late, please do go to the dashboard, create an account, and log in. We also have this category, fashion stubs. So a stub article is just a very basic article, maybe no more than one sentence, and it's survived because it's notable, but we haven't had someone come around to fix them yet or to expand on them. So this is a great place to start because if they've survived this long, you don't have to worry about someone deleting it, but we really could use your work. So if you scroll through here and you find something and you're like kind of surprised it's not built out yet, that's a good candidate for starting to edit, right? So let's go down here. So Jeannie and Maria, tell me when to stop when you see something. It's like, hey, we shouldn't have that as a stub article. We should have more than that. Caesar.
I was going to say, you could share that screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sharing the screen. It's shared, but I'm not showing it. There we go. So this is the fashion stubs article. I'm sorry, category here. So these are articles, as I mentioned before, someone had put as a tag, it's a stub and it's a fashion related article. So as you scroll down here, you will see some articles, hopefully, that are surprised that they are on this list that we should try to improve. Eyewear, that's kind of odd that that would be there. I like this one, fake mustache. Somehow that's fashion, but I guess it is. Let's keep going here. Lip liner, lip stain. Anything jump out at you that we should take a look at?
I don't know if I missed it, but I know that someone in the comments mentioned Ruth Bader Ginsburg's collar and the use of the collar as an accessory. I don't know if we flipped through that already.
Yeah, if someone could look that up, like what would be the most relevant article for that, and then we can inspect that. Now, another thing that's useful as well for folks is sometimes the article has been improved and this article does not belong in the stub list anymore. So even just sorting things out and saying, oh, this article is better, it doesn't need to be in a to-do list anymore, is very useful for us in the community. So please don't feel like you need to do deep research or be an expert on fashion. If you can just inspect the article and say, hey, this is pretty long now, it doesn't belong in a stub category, that's very useful. So let me go ahead and try that with one of these. Let's go to lip liner, for example. And you'll see that although it is not super long, it's not really a stub anymore. In fact, I have a tool here that kind of predicts it's a start class article. So what I can do is remove it. So I can actually go in here and say edit source, or I can go to edit mode and go down to the bottom and just get rid of the category that says fashion stub, like that, right? So I can go in there and just get rid of that and say remove stub message. And even that is useful to us in the community because that allows us to reprioritize writing for articles that really need it. Although just looking at this, I can see some things that you might want to improve, like there's an entire paragraph without many hyperlinks there. And there's only really one reference in this entire article. So I think one thing you could do is go in there and look for more references and add that content here. So let me just show you one example of a real edit we can make here. So I'd say pigment is probably one that I could highlight. All right, so let's go in and do that. So I'm going to go here and say edit. And I will go in here and just double click on the word pigment. And I can hit this chain button here just to link it to another page in Wikipedia. And notice that does a pretty good job of matching that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on pigment. And then there it is. It's linked right there. And then if I want to do wax, I can go in here and link to wax. And it's smart enough to kind of say, oh, you highlighted waxes, but I should look for wax as well. And anything else you can see, that's pretty good for now. They've linked to the different manufacturers, although that's a very limited list given how many folks make lip liner. But let's go ahead and hit publish changes. And I can just put in here and saying added wiki links like that. And if I want to watch it, I can click on that and publish that page. So I've just done 2 improvements. I've said this is no longer a stub. Well, I've also linked this into other parts of Wikipedia simply by doing that. Okay. And then you can see here, this is the nav box we talked about before. There is, you know, the curated box that folks have edited to be down there. So that is it. That is how you edit a Wikipedia article in the most simplest form. And if anyone has any other articles we want to look at, feel free to send it to us in the social media. There is a question about creating articles. Is that right, Richard? I saw something in there.
Yeah, there was a question about some create an article. Create an article about themselves. So we generally discourage it. But if you do have, and just this today only, if you give some of your references, we can help perhaps put it into place and see if some volunteers would be interested in creating your article. But that just applies to this person who made this comment because I don't want to make it apply generally.
Yeah, we do have a conflict of interest policy in Wikipedia, so that does apply. In general, don't edit things for which you don't think you can edit neutrally on. That's the general rule, and those would probably be friends, relatives, your employer, things like that. So use some common sense, but we do have a whole policy around disclosing whether you're a paid editor or a conflicted editor, right? So, Richard and myself have...
Oh, okay. I totally misunderstood. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Oh, Yeah, Mika, I'm very sorry. So you want to write about Georgia O'Keeffe? Please, yeah, please write about it with Georgia O'Keeffe. Please mention that she was mention her work in the Art Students League. Mention her work as a designer. Yeah, and if you want to, if you want to do some, if you're inspired by your personal work and things that you have in common with Georgia O'Keeffe, that is great. That's how being a Wikipedia editor works. You find something in your personal life that connects to history or to culture, and you get inspired by it. I mean, sometimes I'm walking down the street and I see something and I look it up on Wikipedia and I see if it's there, and if it's not there, I want to add it. So yeah, please. One of the problems about Wikipedia is sometimes it seems too intimidating. Like it's not welcoming, and that's our fault. But we want to make it more welcoming. So please, if you want to edit about Georgia O'Keeffe and talk about her work as a designer, that would be a super useful contribution. And thank you so much, Mikhail, for that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that I'm glad you asked that. I mean, we have folks all the time who edit about alumni and things like that. That's not a conflict of interest. That means that you have an interest. It's not a conflict. And if you feel like you can edit neutrally, that's great. And we can actually take a look at the Georgia O'Keeffe article. I'm glad you brought that up because, we have some tools that give us some predictions, and her article is only predicted to be a B class article. So I think you're absolutely on target. It's although this prediction system we have is more about style and features, how it looks. I think there is some correlation saying that since it hasn't been built out in a way that Wikipedia's system thinks is high quality, it's probably missing huge chunks. And you're absolutely right. If it's not talking about her, work in fashion, then that's a big missing piece of the puzzle there. So absolutely, please do add that. And if we had people go into Wikipedia and not edit because they're affiliated with their school and everything, we'd have a lot fewer articles. So please do edit about those things. Those are great gateways to editing. So yeah, we can take a quick look at this. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, and it is quite nice to show, aspects of people's careers that aren't covered. So obviously Georgia O'Keeffe is more known as a painter, but her work as a designer would be quite useful to know about too. And you never know what other areas people have been active in.
Right.
Oh, there's a good Wikidata question.
Mm-hmm.
Does Wikipedia auto-reconcile its items with items in Wikidata, or do editors match them?
That's a good question. Wow, I'm glad we're getting really good questions about Wikidata here. Richard, you want to take that on?
I was hoping you would.
I could, but I want you to.
It's a bit of both, I guess. Maybe perhaps you want to take it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways, but I'm glad you used the word reconcile. So that is a word that's used in kind of database and librarian and museum circles. Like, how do you have what's in this database correlate to what's in that database? That's not a trivial problem. That's actually quite complex sometimes. Is Mark Smith in this database the same as Mark Smith in that database? And it is done with a combination of auto matching, if it's just unambiguously a match. If it's like a super unique name and you see other metadata that signals it's a good match. Sometimes it's just manual. Like, we give up. We don't know what to do. We need some human eyeballs to make the determination. And then we also kind of have in the middle a series of what we call games or interfaces that provide micro tasks to people. So we actually do have a whole system called the Wikidata game system that says, this is something, I think it's this. Could you please click yes or no to help us match them? And that's been fairly successful in our community too. So you have kind of the easy auto match, the really hard manual matching, and then the game type things in the middle. And we've actually designed some really cool things to help match things using that game interface in the past. And that's been super useful. So I think that's the basic answer is yes, multiple ways. Hopefully 80% of the cases can be either auto matched or game matched. And then the hard cases, we try to keep to a minimum that require hand intervention. But it's not easy. Like, we're still kind of new. Wikidata is only how many years old now? 6, 7 years old, right, Richard? Or?
Yeah, but and effectively it's shorter because it was just sort of in its beginning phases.
Right.
And the nice thing about the Wiki universe is that there might be an automatic match, and the automatic match might be wrong, and anyone can fix that because it's we're trying to use artificial intelligence and other things more cleverly, but it's all about the human at the end. So if you see, computers often make mistakes, and that's why it helps that Wikimedia is a global project, as a global volunteer project.
Right. And I thought I'd show you just some examples of what these games look like. I don't have the URL there. Maybe we can put it into the notes for the show, not the show, but the editathon. Although it's more advanced, but I'm glad people are asking it. That means people are interested. So these are a list of games people have made to say, how do I connect something in Wikidata to something, either something else in Wikidata or something in Wikipedia? So sometimes these are just extracting information we know in Wikipedia and putting it into Wikidata, or maybe someone has made a new article in Wikipedia and we need to match it to what's in Wikidata. So one example is this depiction game where I worked with Jeannie and the Met to create a game where we said, an AI system said, I think this is a bridge in this painting. Can you verify yes or no? And this was actually a pretty cool project where I think it was the first use of AI in any large scale within the Wikipedia community for images. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. So yeah, take a look at the Wikidata game, what they call the distributed games. And anyone, believe it or not, anyone watching this casting right now, you can make your own game. There's actually what we call an API. You can, as long as you know how to code a little bit, you can write a game that says, there's a pile of this, there's a pile of this, and see if they match. And it's actually pretty neat that there's a system where anyone with some programming chops can make their own game to try to improve Wikidata. You can see, match new articles to items. That's exactly what you asked about, right? How do you go in here and say, someone, oh, it's low on tiles. That means that people have exhausted the queue of things to do. I guess it's a good thing. But normally what you'd see is, here's an article that was created in Wikipedia. I think it's this Wikidata item. Should I combine the two or correlate the two? Okay, so feel free to take a look at that Wikidata distributed games. If you look at it in Google, you'll find it.
One of my favorite games is Person Not a Person. So like you have all like the edge cases, you have like the fictional characters, you have the legendary people. And Andrew worked on this great tool for saying what's in an artwork. So is what what person is in artwork, what animals are in artwork, what types of buildings.
Right.
And you can even do what fashion is in artwork. So that's some people. There are some people in the Wikimedia universe who like to specialize in going through all the paintings and figuring out exactly what type of shoes and what type of dress and what type of hat is in this painting.
Right. Right.
That's an awesome thing.
Yeah, that's great. And yes, so Georgia O'Keeffe, that's a great one. How do we get from Georgia O'Keeffe to distributed game? I think it's all kind of in the same world of Wikidata. Can you clarify? Oh, here's a good question. Can you clarify what you mean by auto reconcile? Yes. So probably the best thing to do is to point you at the most popular tool in this space. It's called Open Refine. And this is a tool that is pretty well known in library and museum circles, even if it's a little bit complex. So I guess we could go take a look at it real quick just to show you where it is, because it is the most popular tool. And it used to be a Google, like a hosted service, like you have Google Docs. It used to be, I can't remember. Was it just called Google Refine? I can't remember what it was called. But anyway, Google decided, we're not interested in this anymore, and gave it to the community of editors, or not editors, but the open source community. And that's what we see now. So if you go and take a look at Open Refine, you will see this. And it's got nice tutorials, and it even has like Wikidata as a built-in plugin. And I don't want to say that necessarily that Wikidata is the main reason, but almost tons of people are using this for Wikidata to try to connect their databases to Wikidata. So take a look at this tool. It's free, it's open source, and it works with Wikidata out of the box. So you might want to take a look at that as a way to say, here's my database of names and IDs, and can you match it against Wikidata? And what we mean by auto reconcile, it's that if you tell Open Refine, if you're very high confidence, automatically make that reconciliation. And then other cases where you're not so confident, just leave it like yellow and we'll check it out manually. So that's what I mean, is that some tools allow you to auto connect stuff if you're highly confident. And Open Refine is like one of the main tools for that. Right, Jeannie? Are there any other things you can mention about advice on reconciling?
Open Refine is the main one. It's what I've been using to reconcile our data. And there are pretty good tutorials to help you if you're new to Open Refine to use. It also connects. I've used it to connect to other vocabularies like the Getty, the AT, and ULAN.
Great. Yes, absolutely. And don't be afraid to play with it. I mean, you can run it in a mode that never makes any edits. Just experiment with it to say, I just want to check my data set against Wikidata or against any other, as you said, Getty or other places. So what they have is what they call a reconciliation API. So most major, maybe I shouldn't say most, but many large institutions have what they call a reconciliation API. And it's basically just a service that they have saying, do you have this? And then they'll respond with, I think we do, or I think we don't. And your OpenRefine can figure out whether there are matches that way. So take a look at it. And as Jeannie said, like Getty, Met, Smithsonian, all these folks have some kind of version of that. And that's what people use is OpenRefine. So good question. We're getting into the weeds, but it's good weeds, really interesting weeds here. Let's see. Any other questions here? We said about copyright. Should we bring this one up, Richard, about copyright?
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible to use copyright images by getting permission to do so? And is there a mechanism? Oh, Richard, this is a good one for you to start with. How about that?
Yeah, so I answered a little bit in the comments, but in general, so the Wikipedia and the Wikimedia Foundation projects are designed to be used and reused. So they're all under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike or similar licenses. So which means that you can use Wikipedia articles and most of the images on places like Wikimedia Commons for any sort of purpose you want, including the images that have been donated by the Met. In terms of copyrighted images of, say, contemporary artwork, usually Wikipedia doesn't operate on a permission basis. It isn't like we don't have images that we have specifically by permission because we want to design to be reused. We do use some images of contemporary artwork. We use them only in limited places and only at limited scale, and we don't have multiple cases of them per article. So we try to just not to have a special permission because we're a volunteer-driven project. We can't sign project contracts with everybody for permissions, but we try to make minimal use and the most educational use possible. So among other justifications, you'll say, how is this used in an article? At what scale is it used? And what is it in many articles or is it in one or two articles? So there's a fair amount of copyright involved if you're dealing with copyrighted images. But if they're not copyrighted, then of course we can use them quite widely, and of course donations like the Met's donation can be used in not just art articles but history articles, cultural articles. There's quite a range. Generally, if it's a contemporary artist, we try to use like one image, at least one image of artwork, and then have a proper discussion so it's educational inside the article.
Right, and in general, two other aspects might be interesting. One is sometimes you can just go to the copyright holder and ask. Sometimes they don't know better. I won't say don't know better, but they didn't think about it and said, yeah, I'm happy to release it. And one of the weird things is that the easiest way to get that permission is to get that person to upload it to flickr.com. And you're like, wait, Flickr? Is that still around? It is. It is actually, strangely enough, because Flickr was at its height when Wikipedia kind of launched, there is still this kind of nice relationship between Flickr and Wikipedia in that way, that if someone uploads an image to Flickr and then changes the license on that image to either be CC0, like public domain CC0, or what we call CC BY, which means that you can use it as long as you attribute me, anyone can do whatever they want with it, then we can bring over that image immediately into Wikimedia Commons. We have a tool that just points to the image on Flickr and says, bring it over. So that's the nice thing. We've done that. We've actually encouraged museums to upload their collections to Flickr and release it under a license. And that's the easiest way to get content into Wikipedia versus having to coordinate an upload campaign or something like that. Other things, as Richard said, like we do have limited use for fair use, but it's very limited. And we don't like doing that. We like to try to get the images completely free. But in certain cases, we can use like a low res image one time for fair use. But in general, we want to try to get them free.
Mikhail asks another question. Is it best practice to read several articles and write your own text? Yes. So you should, when you're working on a Wikipedia article, you should obviously you shouldn't just cite one source. You should look at several sources, write your own text. You don't want to copy text from somewhere else, and then cite it as you would a scholarly article. Wikipedia is very heavy on citations, at least when it's a good Wikipedia article. There's of course a difference between a good Wikipedia article and a not so good Wikipedia article, but the good Wikipedia article will have quite a lot of citations. In fact, it will usually have more than a scholarly article will have because of the nature of Wikipedia. because not everyone in Wikipedia is an expert in this topic, but we can cite the experts who've written these various publications. And so you'll notice, particularly if something is slightly controversial, there will be more citations that you might be used to seeing in another format. And it's cool if you want to do 2 or 3 citations for a fact. That is not so much overkill. It's like appreciated, but at least 1 citation for a fact would be helpful.
Right. Great. We had a question about someone who's trying to sign. I can't tell. Oh, so Jamie, make sure that those 4 things you type are the tilde. It's the squiggly character in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard that you've probably never used before, and I never use unless I'm signing. So make sure when you're signing, you put squiggle, 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 squiggle 4 times in a row. So that's probably shift that key, right, Richard? Is it shift? Yeah.
Yeah, it's to the left of the one on my keyboard, but it may vary, especially internationally. I have an American keyboard.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh no, if you want to finish this, yeah.
No, I'm saying if you're thinking that's really weird and unfriendly, you're absolutely right. It's a strange thing.
Wikipedia's it's 20 years old now, so and it's all handmade. So our technologists are slowly working to make as much of it upgraded and bring along all the existing articles that have been written over these 20 years by thousands and tens of thousands of people. So yeah, hopefully we can make the signatures a little bit easier.
Right. Thank you, Juliana, for chiming in. Absolutely. This is you. In fact, right now, if you want, you can rewind the YouTube video to the beginning and watch it from the beginning. I think in Facebook, I do believe you need to wait for it to be over before you rewind it. But if you go to the YouTube, you can watch it from the start right now if you like. But I'm glad you could join us. And great. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question, Richard. From Emily, is there a way for a new editor to get a new article published, or do they always have to go through draft and approval?
Yes, I know. Yeah, so you do not always.
Wait, but you said yes and no. Which one is it?
I'm sorry. Yes. This is a good question. You do not always have to go through draft and approval. So the draft is used for some purposes, but if you want to start a new article, you can just create a link to it, say from your user page, click on the link and start writing it. You might want to start in the sandbox if you're starting a brand new article, especially if if it might not be finished the first time you press save. Because you want to make sure you have maybe 2 or 3 citations when you launch, especially a new article. But you do not need to use the draft process. I also wanted to share, and Andrew's rolling over this right now. We have sorry.
I can go back. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a list of exhibitions. So these are recent exhibitions in the last 20 years or so at the Met. And some of them have Wikipedia articles. So those are the ones that are blue. The ones that don't have Wikipedia articles are in red. You're welcome to work on the ones that have articles, that many of them are not complete, and the ones that don't have articles, especially if you saw the show and you appreciated the show. And you can use some of the Met publications, but you are also very much encouraged to use things like reviews, like art reviews. Something was in the Times, something was in whatever other publication, because of course Wikipedia depends largely on secondary sources. So if you appreciate any of these exhibitions, or if you're just interested in them, you can. That's one of the things you can write about. That's maybe a little bit. Maybe you might feel a little bit more comfortable if you went to the show, or even if you just can read an article about the show.
Right. Yeah. And there's a great question, Emily, because it's quite confusing sometimes for newcomers to Wikipedia, because people who sign up as new users get directed to this process called articles for creation. Right. It says, if you want to make a new article, go through this process, draft it, and then submit it, and someone will look at it, and you'll get a thumbs up or thumbs down. And it's one way, but we really don't recommend it all the time, because it's a backlog. So it can be very unsatisfactory if you're excited and you want to edit, and then it says the queue is 3 months long. It's not a great user experience. And also, it's not needed. Like, Wikipedia doesn't have a requirement that you need to pre-submit your draft. And the reason why we do like the draft idea is that you can kind of have it half-baked without being fully in view on Wikipedia. It's kind of out of sight for a little bit. But after it gets to a certain spot, maybe even 3-4 sentences, and you've asserted the notability, like, this designer is absolutely notable because they've had their show in New York during Fashion Week and everything. If you're ironclad sure this person is notable, then you can move it out of draft into article space, as we call it, even if it's not completely done. But for the first 2 sentences or 3 sentences for new editors, probably the draft version is a good idea. So you can see here like heavenly bodies or these types of things. You probably want to start drafting. But the cool thing is that being in this list, you can kind of see how other articles are done, right? So you kind of know the rhythm of this article. So the exhibition title was the 2019 High Fashion Art Exhibition at the Anna Wintour Costume Center, and you can see the different sections that it has. So if you kind of mimic this structure in the Heavenly Bodies one or the Masterworks one, you're in pretty good shape. And
if you're working on, and this is a general rule in Wikipedia, if you're starting a new article on a designer or on an exhibition or on a type of clothing or fashion accessory, look at some existing examples and find a nice example and borrow its format. Wikipedia is made with sharing, so feel free to look at the format of some other articles and maybe that can help give you some inspiration because every Wikipedia article is written by a normal human being.
Right.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, and thanks for folks who are talking and giving advice to other users. That's great to see. So Akiko's here said, as long as you're a registered user, you can put one up. And that's absolutely right. That was one of the main reasons why Wikipedia became as big as it was, is that you don't need permission for everything. It's just go in and try it. And I didn't go over these principles at the beginning, but they are absolutely pivotal in our community. It's this idea of assuming good faith. And even though we're 20 years old and sometimes it can feel like we're a little bit gruff in Wikipedia, in general, we still say, assume good faith of any new user who comes in to try to edit. Don't be overwhelmed by the rules. Just start editing. And as long as you are not someone who seems like you're a paid editor or that you're unwilling to compromise, as long as you're going in good faith, you're trying, you are conversing with folks, you're not going to get in trouble or anything, right? We want new editors to feel welcome in this space. But that's why we also recommend editing articles that are stubs or short as kind of a first step is probably the better move rather than as a new person starting a new article. That's a pretty big lift, right? It's kind of like building a house with no experience versus being a carpenter for a little bit, trying to, pound in nails and learn how to use a screwdriver. So sometimes it's better to do these smaller tasks first, get the lay of the land, and then think about the big new article lift when we get to those things. Yep. Oh, great! We have some folks showing us what they're doing here. So tell us.
So yeah, we have the article has been started on Marceline the fabric, and I'm actually let's.
Yeah, why don't you bring it up and we'll take a look at it. Not to put too much pressure on the editor, but
yeah, it's okay.
We're happy to give you some pointers here.
Yeah, I wanted to. I'm sorry. Let me share the tab.
Great to hear Emily found that useful. Great to hear that.
Type of grain fabric made from tefilla silk, but more pronounced than plain tefilla. So yeah, we want to get some more sources on this. That's probably the start. But this is a good start. It has nice to have a Proust quote in there. So it's a nice reference.
Which quote?
It's mentioned in.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in Journées de lecture on reading Ruskin in English.
Okay, so some things that we can immediately give you feedback on. So good, you're drafting. It hasn't been reviewed yet or hasn't been submitted. That's good. So you'll notice that you want to look at other articles in Wikipedia, and you'll notice that it always starts off the same way. So you want to say, what's the title again? Sorry.
Marceline is.
Right. Marceline is a type of fabric, and then Marceline's in bold, is a type of fabric made from taffeta silk, but more pronounced than plain taffeta. And then you probably want to hyperlink taffeta if no one knows what that is, right? And then women's dresses, probably want to lowercase the W in women's because that's not a proper noun. And then, that looks good. You got good detail there. So maybe hyperlink to other things. But it's a good start. I mean, great. You don't have to put that you're doing it as part of our editing meetup there. You can put that on the talk page, though. You don't have to put it in the article. But I appreciate you putting that and giving us a nod there. So I would take that last line where it says creating this article as part of the Met Wikipedia editing meetup. You can copy that and put it on the talk page. So maybe Richard, you can click on that.
Yes.
Maybe you can move it. Can you move it for him?
Yeah, I can.
For them. Just show them how it's done.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to put it on the talk page, and I'm going to add the comment. So add comment is my summary, and There's their comment. And this is the appropriate. This is the good place to. Well, I didn't link it properly, but we can fix it.
Yeah. Right.
So I apologize to the Wikipedians out there. But yeah, this is the place. So if you have any, say, questions like, hey, can you help me find something about this Proust reference? Something, maybe some other references you're looking at, and you can discuss, what should be in this article. Is this truly the right? Is this the right fabric that we're discussing, or is this a variation on the fabric? Things like that. But thank you for starting, and we are offering special support if anyone wants to work on fashion topics for now or even for the next 2 weeks. I think I officially pledged to help support you in the chat session if anyone wants to work on this article or any other general fashion article for the next 2 weeks. We're happy to help support it and help get these things out of draft and to fully published status. Offer only valid for the next 2 weeks. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And although we had scheduled this for 2 hours, maybe we'll just run another 10, 15 minutes just to support folks, because it looks like you folks are really interested in giving us good questions and you're producing stuff. That's great to see. And we can, feel free to send us what you're working on in the discussion and chat. We have one of our friends from South Africa, Douglas Ian Scott. Hello. And it's great to see folks from all over the world here. We saw folks before from Germany, Argentina, Italy, Israel. Just off the top of my head, it's amazing how many folks we can include in this. And we typically have 20-some folks in the room in New York City, and this is just great to see. So
we have Z from Zilchko from Croatia asking about Wikidata. Yes, of course, we welcome Wikidata contributions in fashion. Please share it on the page and in the channels.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe this is a good time. Because we had kind of alluded to this before, Jeannie, about Wikidata and what it could mean for visualizing stuff. And one of the things that we've been trying to do at the Met and with the Wiki community is getting beyond just the text. I mean, Wikipedia is an amazing reference, but it is, strangely enough, still mostly reproducing what Britannica and World Book do, right? It's like amazing how many people come together to produce what is mainly a text tome. So what Wikidata can do is start to make connections and to show things in ways that we've really quite never seen before. So this does have a fashion relationship here, but this is one of the visualizations we've been using quite a bit in the last few years. Not few years, like last year or so. And this is using Wikidata to show relationships among items in Wikidata that you might not have ever thought of before. So this is a great...
Zoom in a little.
I'm sorry?
Zoom in a little, yeah.
Yes. So this is an example of how we might start with this very simple item in Wikidata. And this is what you might have seen before. This is by John Singer Sargent, a really amazing painting. Jeannie, how tall is this? Like pretty much life size or bigger, right? Bigger than life size.
Yes. I don't have the dimensions offhand. It'll be on our page.
But it's imposing. It's big, right? And you know that John Singer Sargent was like one of the most sought after portrait artists for high society. And this was a portrait of Madame X that he made in Paris of this socialite. So the cool thing about this is rather than just reading about it, we actually have all these connections and relationships modeled in Wikidata. So if I zoom out here, you will see all these different facts that we know because these are all in Wikidata. So if you go in here, you will see that this is the actual record in Wikidata of the woman who was kind of like, I don't know, I heard historians say she was like the Kim Kardashian of her time in Paris, which, Jeannie, you can bash me over the head if that's inaccurate. But this was Virginia Emilie Avignon-Gautreau, and she was like a socialite, and she was so sought after for artists wanting to paint her portrait. You can see that other artists painted portraits of her, but this is probably the most well-known. And we actually have information about studies, like, not full paintings done of her in other collections. So you can see that while the Met holds this painting, we can see all the other interesting relationships here of this one socialite and all the paintings and other collections around the world for her. But the cool thing about this is that we can also see, because Wikidata is not just a arts database or a movie database, but the database of the sum of all human knowledge, that the black dress that Rita Hayworth wore in the movie Gilda was actually inspired by this painting. And you can see there's a lot of pop culture references to this painting. If you see, there's an episode of Mad Men when one of the women wore a velvet dress similar to this. So you can see all these things that were influences from this thing. So the cool thing is that Wikidata, we have this modeled, and you can see this in this knowledge graph. And that's why people are so excited about Wikidata, is that it is a database that holds information about people, about paintings, about fashion, about movies. And once you have this all in the same database, or you have the connections, you can start to do really neat things, not just in the written domain, but in the visual domain, to show these relationships like this.
That's the power of data, and that's the power of Wikidata. That's because that's essentially just a query. We're just looking at a query, but with Wikidata, we can display the results in this very cool visual way, and you can see, actually these are just data fields, but to see the thumbnail images and to see the actual connections, very enlightening.
And I was just,
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to add that it's really an interesting story. You see the connections here, but if you just dig a little bit deeper, what, this painting, the essence of its display in the public, how that affected the lives of not only the sitter, but also the artist. And then just from a fashion perspective, was that the fashion of the day? And also, taking a look at how the sitter was covered in a powder, and you can see that only the little tip of her nose is red because that's where the powder wasn't. I mean, very interesting fashion elements there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about this, if you'd shown me something like this 10, 15 years ago, I'd be like, okay, how many days did it take you to do that animation? Did you need a supercomputer? You know what? The URL on the screen, just type it into your mobile phone, your tablet, your low-end laptop, your Chromebook, whatever. You can do exactly what I'm doing on screen right now on your computer. So just go in a web browser to w.wiki/B, U, A. And, Jeannie and I have demoed this at the major museum conferences and everything. And everyone is just like blown away. Like, wait a minute. I can make these connections with Wikidata. It's like, absolutely. And what's amazing is that it's just code that does this, but it looks really nice here, right? So I would bring it up for you here if I can. Yeah. And you don't have to know any of this code, but you can enjoy the spoils of it, right? So this is basically asking Wikidata with this programming language called Sparkle to bring back those items and the relationships that you see. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm not showing it to you. Let me bring it back here. And you don't have to know any of this code. You just need to type in that URL and enjoy it. But that's the code. But don't worry, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just enjoy the visual output of that. And it's so much more satisfying and rich. And we found that when people don't understand why Wikidata, this suddenly makes a lot clearer. Like, oh, that's why you spend all that time putting in those statements and everything else, because suddenly you can visualize these connections in ways that you can't by reading an article, right? So try to explain the complexity of what we see on the screen with text. It would take a lot of text, right? And it wouldn't be as satisfying either when you do something like this. So go to that URL, w.wiki/BUA, and have at it, play with it. And the cool thing is you can actually click on different nodes. If you want to explore, you can go in there and you can explore more of Wikidata. And I told you about Wikidata for the first time today. You can surf Wikidata just by clicking on nodes and expanding them like this. So
and Andrew, this is the English version, but I assume if you change the language, you can see this in a different language in the query.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't even hit on the amazing thing of all this is that, we're like looking at this in English and it's like, well, what if I don't read English? No problem, because we have painting, main subject, creator, all those things translate into 100+ languages. So what happens is you just go back here and you can change your language to whatever we support, right? So you can go in here. Let me see if it changes here. Yeah, let me go ahead and try that here. So we go in here and not sure if I can run this query here. There we go. So we come back here and we go to the edit code here. Notice in the upper right-hand corner, if I remove that banner, which is blocking everything, if we remove that, you'll see there's a code up there for the language. So I can actually go up there and change it to Esperanto, French, Chinese, anything that we support. Canadian English, I've never tried that before. I'm not sure that's going to give us very different results. But let's go Spanish. And let's go ahead and run that thing for Spanish. And you can see all these terms are in Spanish now. And there's the power of Wikidata too. Like me, I don't have to know 100, 200 languages to make this useful to all those speakers of it. I just do it once here, and then you just choose the interface. Boom, you've made it useful to all those language speakers over there. And that's something you can't really do with Wikipedia because you need to manually translate so many things. So let me try just one that's not a traditional Latin alphabet and make sure we can show you what some of that looks like. Ooh, Arabic. I'm not sure which language that is. It's an Arabic-like script, but let's go ahead and see what happens if I do this. If I run it. Okay, well, some of them have Arabic labels, some don't. So you can see, but the connections there, those have been translated there. So you can see how really cool this is once you put things into Wikidata. The relevance to other languages are really, really cool. Yep. Yep, and Sharon looks like she's excited. Yes, this is like, we did this a year or two ago. It still blows my mind. We can do this. We need more examples of this. So if you folks are interested, try doing this.
And Andrew, there are different ways also to visualize query results. There's a timeline, there's a graph, there's a table.
That's a great point. I mean, so look, I'll just show you this. We don't have an example right now that does all these things, but if your query, as we call it, brings back, oops, I'm sorry, we are in the right to left language. So let's go back to a left to right language here. I just can go back to English. If your query against Wikidata brings back what we call time series data, you can make a timeline. If it brings back map data, we can put on a map. If it brings back like a tree structure of stuff, we can make it into a tree. So this is really cool that you can do all kinds of neat visualizations without having to be a programmer. You just need to be able to, copy and paste some code here. But in terms of visualizing it, you don't need a lot of talent to say, show me images, show me graphs, things like that. It's pretty amazing that we can do all these things today. So that is just a little teaser in terms of what you can do with these tools. And we did have a question from Doug. Oh, so Douglas said, what tool are we using to view this? So actually, this is what we call Wikidata Query. So if you go to query.wikidata.org, you will get this. I encourage you to take a look at examples. So these are great. You don't have to know anything about programming. You just go ahead and say, show me all the named cats in Wikidata, which is kind of fun. Or you can say, I think there's the mayor example I talked about before. Right, timeline of mayors in Amsterdam. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is running that query, and it's going to bring back a timeline because it has time series data there, I believe. And it might be really big because I think there's been a lot of mayors of Amsterdam over the years. So you can see 721 results instead of a list. I think it'll bring back a visual. It's not coming. Oh, I think it's still rendering. Sorry, it's crunching. But go ahead and take a look at the examples there to see some of the cool demos people have arranged there. I'm not sure why this is not coming back right away. Oh, there. Oh, it's so big that it's taking a long time to render. But you can start to see it fill in. It'll put in images if we have images of those mayors there. So, all kinds of cool things you can do with that. And it's as simple as, hey, I don't want to know about the mayors of Amsterdam. Well, no problem. Change that to New York City or change it to Tokyo, whatever you want. And don't bother recoding it. Just build on what's already there. So this is called Wikidata Query, and it's really powerful. And just try some of the examples just to see some of those things. Okay. Oh, good question here. For bilingual editors, are we going to be encouraged to translate articles? Richard, what do you think?
Yes. Yeah, so very much so. Obviously, Wikipedia is in 300 languages. It's very uneven. Sometimes an article is best in English. Sometimes it's best in Spanish. Sometimes it's best in Japanese. And often we help fill that gap by translating, especially if it's, say, a culturally Spanish-speaking topic. It might be better in Spanish Wikipedia than English Wikipedia. So we do encourage people to translate, but do keep in mind that the Wikipedia articles are not exact translations of each other. Each Wikipedia community is a little bit different. The rules and the culture of English Wikipedia and German Wikipedia and Spanish Wikipedia are a little bit different from each other. So keep in mind in the article, the language that you're writing in, that you're following the rules of that Wikipedia. But we very much encourage translations and partial and complete translations. And if you want, there's a tool called the Content Translation Tool they might want to use, which helps you a little bit in creating the formatting in the destination language. But you definitely want to change some machine translation. You don't want machine translation because Wikipedia is a human-made product and it has to be read by humans. And humans don't like reading things that are written by machines. Right? So yeah, so please, it's a very productive way to contribute to Wikipedia, especially if you're not sure what to write about and you're bilingual. You can translate from one language to another, and that is a really great way to share knowledge between cultures.
And we do have some tools. Like if you go down here, we have languages here. I mean, we didn't even go into that, right? If you didn't notice that when you're reading an article, you can see how many translations there are, and you can see over here we do have ways of changing these things. And we actually have some tools that assist in the translation. Although it's important to note that we don't, an article in one language doesn't have to be the perfect translation of another article in another language. It can be very, very different. So that's something that's not mandated by anything in Wikipedia. Here's a good example. Claire McCardle is a well-known designer, American designer. But this is a great example where you're looking at the Time magazine cover and you're like, hey, how did you get the rights for that? And the answer is, we don't. And this is an example of that fair use being used here. So if you click on the image cover, you'll see here, it says, oh, actually, it does say it's fair use. I mean, that it's public domain. Well, that's good to know if that's the case. Okay, good. Well, and for a lot of magazine covers, you'll see that it's low resolution, and we claim fair use, saying that we're using a low-res version just to illustrate the article. But I had no idea this is public domain, even though it's a 1955. Richard, you're going to have to explain that to me later. I don't know how that happened. That
it might have to do with some publication history copyright, and it might be just...
Good for us. We have that picture of Claire McCardle. So yeah, translation and languages are down here, and we encourage you to do those translations. This is an interesting question or a comment here. So 2 of my ancestors commissioned an etching by Rembrandt. It's in the New York Historical Society. You can see how visual knowledge might help with genealogy. I mean, just looking at genealogy, if you look at some of the examples in Wikidata Query, it kind of shows like all of, was it Bach's children and what they went on to do, or just to show the evolution of like one artwork and how it inspired other artworks over time. They're pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, you might want to you might try to find that Rembrandt etching on Wikidata and see if you can edit that. It might not have a Wikipedia article per se, but it probably can have a Wikidata item, and you can also see if, I don't know about your ancestors, but if you had ancestors in New Amsterdam and there have been something written about them, or then probably they should have a Wikidata item.
Right. Great. We have Giovanna from Brazil. Thank you for that. Giovanna is one of our Wikidata, evangelists in Brazil. She's great. Great to see more people finding entry points to Wikidata. That's great. Let's see. We're running to the top of the hour, so we shouldn't go on too much longer. But we really are happy that more than 100 folks have stuck around, because hopefully you've seen something interesting or you're editing something interesting as we move through the different topics that people are bringing up. More than happy to answer some more questions about these things. Wikidata is this whole new universe that maybe the next one, Maria and Jeannie, we have another one just on Wikidata, which we definitely could have. I mean, we've never done one before.
Yay for Wikidata. I think that the dashboard is down again. I don't know if we've overloaded the dashboard with all the edits. I hope.
We'll be able to fix it later. I mean, you don't need to see it now, but we'll be able to find the edits later, so it'll be okay, even though we put some pressure on it.
Yeah, if you missed the comment earlier that Jeannie made, we do love Wikidata because it makes, when we've added Wikidata IDs to the Met's open access collection, it allows our collection to be interoperable with other collections as well as more useful on Wikidata.
Absolutely. And that's something that we are seeing more and more with the museum world, that Wikidata is kind of the the hub for a lot of the connections that are happening in the what we call the linked open data work that's being done, which is great. So any last comments from folks do you want to do a last check-in on the dashboard, Richard? You want to bring up any stats while I bring up the main page?
Let's see. It might have crashed. So we've crashed it again. Thanks to our very enthusiastic editors. So don't worry about it. We'll be able to find all the outcomes of the event later. I do see someone is editing in German, so that's a post on our chat system. So I was a request to add the German Wikipedia to be tracked, and of course I'll add the German Wikipedia and any other languages that people are editing. If people are editing in Spanish and Chinese or others, I might just add a few of them because I know there's some people probably editing in Italian and Portuguese.
Right.
So let us know that.
Yeah, and we can we'll definitely update the event page with some stats later on. You can always check the dashboard when we go back. Just some interesting background. That dashboard was originally meant for like classroom work, so we kind of went beyond its intended limits, but that's a good problem, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, and we do want to encourage everybody here, or if you're listening to this, as to watch it at some other point in time, please contribute to Wiki Fashion, and we want to encourage. Again, we have numerous open access images, costume images on our Wiki event page. So please help us contribute MetFashion to the Global Wiki campaign.
Yes. And we need more fashion on Wikidata, Wikipedia. There's just not a lot of fashion compared to other topics.
That's right. And I thought maybe just as a closing part, we can just kind of run down the other things as people get more experience with the editing. You can attack different parts of the task list. So as we said before, we do have the fashion stubs, which is a great place to not only start, but just to keep working in. Like I will sometimes go into the stubs and just say, hey, that shouldn't be a stub, and try to improve them or to reclassify them. Requested images of fashion. This is great. So we try to put also a rating here, whether it's a easy, medium, or hard task. And I think this is important to signal to folks how easy are these things. Also, if you are looking at an article saying, we really should know what a peep toe shoe looks like, and there's no image there, then you can also put this, what we call template, on the talk page, and just to say requested photo. And that signals to folks who watch that cue, oh, I know where that picture is, and they can add those very quickly. So even just tagging and categorizing things is very useful, even if you're not editing full articles with the pros. We also have the requested articles fashion. I think I can click on it real quick just to show you, maybe surprise or not surprise, some of the things that, these are things that people have manually requested, saying we should have an article about this person. And they've even done the research for you. So they've even given you, hopefully, reliable links to those places. And that's great because they've kind of done some of the homework for you already. Or you come down here and you see not just the people, but brands and terms that have not been added yet. So if you go down this list and say, I can't believe we don't have an article about X, then that's a good candidate for maybe you contributing to that. Okay, so that's just an interesting. We do have pineapple lace, though. We see all kinds of lace, but those are needed articles in there. So there's a lot to do, as Jeannie said, in this area. And then we also do a Wiki Project Fashion. If you're really still interested in working, I hope you are, after this, you can go to Wiki Project Fashion. There are tasks here. We didn't even get into this yet, but this is just kind of a tracker to see what are the most important articles in fashion that don't have great ratings. And those are some of the task lists that we've helped build off of that. And then the glossary here, you can even kind of go through here and help us figure out whether we should have a different array of topics here in the clothing navigation box at the bottom. Looking at this just with my eyeballs yesterday, it seemed like it's a kind of a weird patchwork. Like we probably could do a better job of really fully modeling the breadth of fashion topics and clothing topics than what we see right now. And then down here, we have things that I think Richard highlighted, right? Tell us a little bit about what you highlighted down here, Richard.
Yeah, so I just I mentioned there, some of what Sarah mentioned. So the current the current COVID fashion trends and how they relate to historical clothing and among other things, the cottagecore, the fashion of Marie Antoinette, and the walking dress, which is a dress for going out and being seen while you're walking, which is the only way that people are seen nowadays is outside walking. So there are actually a number of photos of walking dresses in the Met collection that have been released. I've struggled. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm trying to figure out exactly what a walking dress is, and also known as a promenade dress. And if someone wants to start that, that would be really great. I want to learn because I want to learn about what a walking dress is, and I can't find any clear source that describes it. But I'm sure there is out there somewhere for someone who has a little bit more expertise.
Right. Good point. And then we also have some of these other terms here that we have really great Met resources for. So you can definitely click out there and point to very reliable sources at the Met. We talked about the exhibitions already. These are fun ones to cover because they are often related to the Met Ball, which gets a lot of, or Met Gala, which has a lot of coverage. Right? And then at the bottom here, I think the last parts are, yes, so it's just great to see so many signups here. Keep the conversation going. Sign up for our continuing Wiki Loves Fashion effort. It is going till when? October or something, Richard?
October 11th, 2 weeks from now. So feel free, if you want to do anything with Wiki Loves Fashion, anything fashion related, you can join our chat and we can help you out specifically with your drafts or any of your types of fabrics or designers or things like that. It runs till October 11th. It's started by the Wikidonne, the Italian women's wiki group, but it's global, and we're glad to participate, and hopefully we can help you work on any fashion related topic and help illustrate it too.
Great. I think it's safe to say, Maria, that putting this message on the front of the Met Museum page was a really great idea. We had so many great participants here. Any closing thoughts from you about the fact that I think having 600 people to start this video was pretty impressive?
We're absolutely thrilled. As Jeannie has already indicated, we know that fashion is a gap on Wikipedia. We know that the Costume Institute is one of the richest collections of fashion. We have numerous resources that are available and accessible, in Watson Library. We have fashion plates, we have exhibition materials. Many of the links are on the Wiki event page. We just want to thank everyone around the world for joining us and for participating in this campaign. We really thank you.
And I want to just add, every edit you do, no matter how minor, just increases the access to our collection even more. And that's our goal. We want to reach as many people as we can with our objects. We feel we can inspire everyone on the planet with an object in our collection. So all of your edits really help make our collection more accessible.
Yes, thanks so much. And we actually have some folks just getting into the chat. Unfortunately, we're about to close it off, but you can rewind, watch the whole thing. It's great to see folks picking up not the pen, but the keyboard while we were doing the training and starting to get their hands into things. And even if you just learn something new today, that's the most important thing. You learn about Wikidata, you learn about knowledge graphs, you learn about how we kind of read Wikipedia articles and how museums and libraries are working with Wikipedia in ways that you probably didn't expect. And hopefully you also learn Wikipedia is not banned by university professors. It's something that Richard and I are very passionate about, making sure people know about. And the fact that the Met Museum is embracing it should prove to your university professors that it's a legit source. But like any source, it's not foolproof. No source is foolproof. So go into it with a critical eye. But I think on balance, it has been a huge, huge positive thing for the world of reliable knowledge. So we thank everyone for being part of this. It's been a breakthrough event. We've never had a virtual editathon, and I can't remember a museum editathon that had 600 people to start off an event and 100 people left at the end. We're really happy to have you here. And so thank you for that. And we will fade to black, but play you out with the really amazing video that the Met produced for the exhibition. So I don't know, maybe Maria and Jeannie, do you have more context around this? I mean, on YouTube, it's like an 11-minute video, but is this a looping playing thing at the exhibition, or is it just made for YouTube?
No, this is an introduction to the exhibition. And again, the exhibition is about time, fashion, and duration. It opens at the Met on October 29th and really juxtaposes fashion and how inspiration has been drawn from different eras into the current eras.
Right. So we'll play out this, and you can find this video on YouTube as well. But I thought it's a nice soothing video. We played at the beginning when we are in the pre-show, just to get folks oriented. But you're welcome to keep editing and keep working on stuff. And we'll might surface some comments from time to time. But for the next 10 to 12 minutes, we'll play out the About Time video, which I thought was really cool. So thanks again. We really appreciate it. And see you on Wiki. And feel free to contact us for any other editing that you want to keep doing.
you.